That this meeting will be recorded and that the recording will subsequently be available for public listening. Do we have any apologies?
Mr. Smith.
Chairman, we also have apologies from Councillors Dempster and Gilroy.
What?
Councillor Ogilvie has just entered. Councillor Geddes isn't present.
He is in the building.
And Councillor Collins.
He's unavailable. Is there any declarations of interest? Councillor Lever.
Please, we've got a vice chairman of the committee, but we don't have a chairman. What's the procedure in terms of electing a chairman?
That's a matter for the full councillor. I should say, Councillor Lever. Today, the vice chairman is assuming the position of chairman at this meeting.
Councillor Wood.
Are we still taking declarations of interest?
Yes.
That's good. On item the one regarding Visit Scotland, I will be leaving the room as my wife works for Visit Scotland.
Any other declarations of interest? Well, we'll move on to item 3, minutes of the meeting of 9th of July of the PHES committee. Yeah. Members in a position to agree the noting of the minutes? Thank you. We'll go on to item 4, the minutes of the Housing Subcommittee on the 2nd of July. These minutes are for approval. I'm happy to move. Thank you. And the minutes, like item 5, the minutes of the Ad Hoc Subcommittee, the Planning, Housing and Variance Subcommittee of the 2nd of July. I'm happy to second. Move on to item 6, the Planning and Environment Budget Monitoring Report for 13-14 for the period ended the 31st of July. Mr. Speedy, have you anything to add?
Nothing to add, Chairman. Thank you.
Members, any questions? I'll give you a couple of minutes to catch up with your papers. Leader, any question?
Chair, it's just on the building warrant and the plan applications money. Is there any evidence of a pick-up in trade there, and are we seeing a reduction in that, or are we still sort of struggling to get applications in?
Thank you, Chair. Currently, when we profile applications against last year at this time, we're about an increase of about 2 or 3% in planning applications, but the building standards is very static compared to last year.
Councillor Wood.
It's within Appendix 3, there's mention of the credit and business plan support. What was puzzling is we haven't had a meeting of the credit subcommittee, and I was wondering as to what had happened there, because as I recall, there was supposed to have been a report going back to the credit subcommittee that has still never been.
You wish to say something?
At the last meeting, the credit subcommittee agreed the governance changes, which we are working on, and are currently working through the invitations for new trustees and the various other financial management arrangements. The second part of the report to the last subcommittee is around the financing of leases with the universities, and we actually have meetings with the universities this week to determine the best way forward for that. And once we have that information, we can come back to members. So we haven't coordinated in the subcommittee as yet, but we'll be doing so probably late autumn.
Councillor Peacock.
Thank you, Chair. Just a quick point on the figures on page 1 of the report with the further measures to be identified, the 140,000 to make the budget into a break-even position. Going by the figures on Appendix 1 there, where it's in various services there are various overspends. I wonder if we have any idea at this stage of some of the measures that may be identified to bring that down to a break-even stage, and would that therefore be more in line with reducing levels of staffing, or just if there's some sort of identification of where that might come from?
Mr. Speedy.
Thank you, Chair. There are a number of options available to us. Members will recall last year we were predicting at one stage an overspend of 191,000, and we managed that down to a break-even point by the end of the year, and we'll use the same management strategy and process this time by looking at various headings where we can stop spending. We are also looking at various measures associated with the service reviews that are being undertaken at the moment, and we'll report back to committee in November on the outcome of these service reviews. And we've invited staff to consider reducing working hours if they wish to have a better work-life balance. And we've been very surprised by the reaction to that, and we intend to implement that very quickly rather than wait to the start of next financial year. So that sort of measure will help us as well balance the books. It's very early on in the year. You have to remember that this is a report that covers up to the end of July, so we will continue to profile the income from building warrants and planning fees, and hopefully that will improve and also help us. Thank you.
I'm not sure. I think I maybe caught Councillor Prentice out the corner of my eye. Were you what done, Councillor Prentice? No. Councillor Smith? Sorry, Councillor Nicholson.
Thank you, Chair. I don't know, I can't call you Chair, can you? You're still the Vice Chair. But the support for local businesses, the Let's Talk Shop, there's £180,000 over the 2 years, and £35,000 will be spent this year. And there's some kind of problem with the delay procurement process. Could you enlighten us what that delay is in the procurement process?
Mr. Gray?
Just purely the time and resource we don't know how to apply to this to move it forward as quickly as we wanted. However, the procurement process puts something in place for 2 years, and therefore there will be a slight difference between this year's spending and next year's spending. But what we said was this would be a 2-year programme, and we'll definitely catch up by the end of the 2 years. And we'll like the full programme that we said we would do. It's purely been we just didn't have enough resource to apply to a full procurement process to start with, but we've caught up on that now.
Members get any other questions? Move to recommendations. Are members in the position to note that the 2.1 based on position at the end of July 2013, planning and environmental services are projected to break even against the 13-14 agreed budget, and will be prepared to note the progress against the delivery of the agreed savings applied to the 13-14 planning and environmental services budget, and it is projected that the agreed savings amounts will be fully secured in the current financial year, apart from the housing saving, which is currently showing a shortfall of 20,000, and this is currently being accommodated in the strategic housing budget. Thank you. Move on to item 7. It's the Economic Development and Infrastructure Asset Class Capital Programme 13-14.
There's an amended appendix.
There is an amended appendix. 1 was sent out. Can I just confirm that all members actually received that or have been given a copy this morning? Yeah, thank you. Who's taking this one? I believe Mr. Herrick is speaking to this one. Have you any to add, Mr. Herrick? And you speaking to this report?
Yes, the 3
favours, we'll top the report, yes, Chair.
Is there anything to add?
No, apart from the revision to the appendix, the report pretty much stands as it is. Thanks.
Members, any questions? Councillor Foster.
Thank you, Chair. 3 or 4 quick things. Now West Pier, glad it's finished. Shame it came in 25% over budget, but we are where we are. Got to take that one in the chin, unfortunately. My question relating to that would be, however, some time ago I met with the Chief Executive. There was circa 470,000 left out of the 2.4 million that was agreed at full council for Sonora regeneration. Now this has come in 125,000 more. Is that coming out of the residue of the 470,000? That's my first question. My second question would be the flood risk. I'll just give you more at one, and you can answer them because you'll get fed up listening to me, no doubt. The second would be the flood risk, 5.10, page 40. The completion of this item is a key action for this financial year, but the main risk remains landowner challenges to the proposals. Now, that's within my board. I'm aware of certain landowners who are not happy or taking council's opinion at the moment. My question would be, what's the likelihood of resolving this amicably? And if not, what processes do we use to finish it? The next one would be the gateway on page 45, appendix 1, Sonora Gateway 50,000. Now, I've repeatedly asked from the Chief Executive down to elected members what the gateways are, where they're going, and when they will be in situ. We agreed more than 50,000 that day in January at the PHES committee, but I see 50,000 is committed to be spent this year and next year, but I can get no answers as to what they are, where they're going, and when they will be in situ, and it will definitely cost more than 50,000. The other one is the Townscape Heritage Scheme. We put 100,000 into that. Initially, my wishes were that it was a simple scheme. He went to the local businesses, they got the estimates from local painters, decorators, do their building up. Council pays half, they pay half. But in January at the PHES committee, we decided to go down the road of making it a Townscape Heritage Initiative. Now this is progressing as I see here, but the forecast net spend for 31,314 is only £10,000. So I put a very simple question. Will money from this scheme not be available prior to 2015? In other words, if I were a business or a premises in Sonora and I was looking for help and money, I could sit back and relax until 2015. Is that the case or not?
Okay, Chair, if I could come back on some of those points for Councillor Foster. The situation on the West Pier, yes, the works are near enough complete there, and we're reporting that there is a cost increase on the original tendered cost. And when we set out the project, we'd always taken the view that when we exposed certain elements of the pier that we might find in taking the decking off, that we would find a level of deterioration that would require further works. And to a certain extent that was allowed for within the contract in terms of additional works taken forward. In terms of the overspend that brings and the rest of the programme and the elements of that are not committed, what we're looking at in particular is the design for the slipway that was also approved. And as we develop that design, we're looking at kind of value engineering approach where we can maybe get the cost down, and we think that there might be potential to save something on the original estimated cost for the slipway that would give us something to offset against the overspend in the West Pier. So it's really trying to manage that within the overall budget. On the flood protection scheme at Stranraer, the way that we took that forward under the new legislation, where we had agreement with landowners, we could move forward with the individual work packages, and that's what we've tried to do over the recent years since the new Flood Risk Management Act came in 2009. And a number of the work packages we've managed to deliver through negotiation, where other third-party land has been involved. The work packages that are left to deliver, and as you've mentioned, Councillor Foster, there are some issues with the land, and we certainly haven't heard back from you. You referenced the fact that one of the landowners was taking Queen's Council opinion on matters relating to the flood protection scheme, and as I understand it, matters relating to previous planning approvals by the planning authority. Now, we don't see that will be resolved. We can't see in terms of the discussions we've had with that particular landowner that we will reach a resolution. There has been a lack of communication recently coming back from the landowner, and it's been difficult to see how we move that forward. I think what we then decide to do is we look at the works packages that we can't deliver by negotiation, and we take another view as a committee on whether we want to just leave the situation as it presently stands. That particular work package, the existing railway embankment and the existing culvert provide a level of protection to the town anyway, but it's probably more information that we'll bring back to this committee when we see a way forward. What the report is asking to do here is just to free up that capital funding for the more general flood risk management element of the capital programme.
The two questions on the THI scheme, or what we call the faceless scheme. Council agreed that funding would form part of a bid to Heritage Lottery as part of a wider Townscape Heritage initiative, which has an element of, I think, what we've called facelift or shopfront improvements. Certainly that's an application to the Heritage Lottery Fund. In discussion with the Heritage Lottery Fund, we've moved this forward, but they won't be accepting an application from us until spring 2014. So at the moment, that funding, yes, is probably earmarked for 2015 in terms of spend on the ground. There are other business support programs that we do have funding for example, the Financial Assistance Small Business Scheme. So if there are any businesses that you'd like us to get in contact with direct, please pass them on, Councillor Foster. Happy to do so and look at how we can work with these businesses on an individual basis. In terms of the gateways, what we're agreed to look at, essentially the two main gateways into Stranraer, A77, A75. We're currently in the process of looking at sites. I think the main focus for us is going to be on the A77 around Loch Ryan and the entrance there, linked to the provision of bird hides and fishing stands, which was part of the overall package as well, and how we can improve that and create a better, not just an entrance, but better facilities for visitors wanting to stop off on Loch Ryan and the way around. And certainly that lies over 2 financial years, but we're hopeful to come back to committee later this year with the proposals.
Councillor Foster.
Thanks, Chair. Just come back briefly. I'm heartened to hear Sederunt this morning. I'm heartened to hear that your attempt to take the money out of the slipway, which I wasn't 100% on from the first place, to address the overspend on the West Pier. That's good news. However, I should have asked, I take your answer on the flood prevention, I take your answer on the gateway. There was, as I said previously, circa 470,000 left out of the 2.4 million. I was led to believe a paper was coming to this committee today with further schemes to be brought forward and worked up. Could you give me an indication when it comes, and could you give me an indication how much money is there, taking into account the overspend on the West Pier, and taking into account that will be addressed by the money that's allocated to the slipway?
I would need to confirm the value that's left in the Stranraer fund to you, but it's certainly, with a fair wind and the re-engineering and the potential for external funding, I'm hopeful that we should be closer to the current figure. What we're intending to do is come to area committee with options for spending that funding, which comes out of the various consultation exercises. Hopefully to do that in November, therefore refer on to this committee for funding.
Chair, if we could just come back briefly, it's a pity you didn't take the slipway to the area committee, but never mind, it's progress. We're learning that the area committee is starting to be consulted. The cynic in me would say that the papers for future spend is not coming forward in order to address any possible overspend that's incurred in the meantime. As I say, that's the cynic in me. But we'll see your paper when it comes in October. We'll get a definitive sum that's available, and hopefully that won't be robbed to support any other schemes that have been previously approved.
Can you just confirm for me that it will be at the area committee in October? November rather than October. So it will be at the area committee at latest November. Thank you. Okay. Councillor Lever.
In 615 on page 43, it makes mention of the 158,000 from Transport Scotland and schemes which will be progressed. Can you give us some indication of how many of these schemes will actually be funded from the 158,000? And for clarification, what's the Whitesands Newell Terrace link as opposed to the Whitesands High Street link? Which of those goes up Bank Street? Because I think we've got an outstanding proposal to establish a cycle link up Bank Street. I'm not quite sure which these come into. And continue on the cycling theme, I have in the past asked that we look at a link between Cullen and Greenlee with Dumfries in terms of a cycleway, rather than cyclists having to go down the very dangerous A75 at that section. Are we making any progress with regard to that?
So just to come back to the last points that the councillor raised, the Cullen to Dumfries scheme is not one that we've taken forward or concentrated on at the present time, but it's certainly one that has been raised at this committee before, and we'll keep that on the horizon in terms of consideration. In terms of the details for the individual schemes, we're looking at Mill Road, Mill Green, and Dumfries in the town, and that design's progressing. The Kilpatrick Macmillan Bridge to the New Abbey Road link, the design's progressing there as well. And the Whitesands to Newell Terrace link is covered in the report in terms of the further funding that we're looking for to take that forward.
Councillor Tuckfield.
Thank you. Chair, while I'm pleased that part of the New Luce, Glenluce Road has been resurfaced, I remember that we were promised when the capital plan was being developed that if there was money left in the capital budget, then it would be spent on drainage. I actually have an email telling me exactly what's wrong with the road. The current size of pipes, culverts cannot cope with the sheer volume of water coming off the slope above the road. There are 4 or 5 crossings required to be increased in capacity, doubling the diameter of the existing pipe to allow 4 times the amount of water to be taken away. There has been no further drainage improvements, and I raised this in February when the road was almost completely closed because of water, holes, etc. It was practically impassable at that time. And can you confirm to me that some improvements will be done on this road before the winter period?
What I can do for the councillor is check with my colleagues in GG First, just in the terms of the works that are proposed at that location. We don't have that level of detail within the report. I know that in the past we certainly, when we talked about improvement schemes and surfacing schemes, we've identified parts of the budget for both the strategic roads programme and the road structural maintenance to deal with drainage issues, and that was either discrete drainage schemes where we weren't doing surfacing but works were required on the roads, or drainage schemes as part of some of the road surfacing schemes. But I can certainly find out from DG First where we're at in terms of what work specifically was happening on the drainage system, and have some information come back to you on that.
Thank you. This road is a lifeline road. I would remind people that the village shop is closed now as well, and people have to travel to Glenluce to the doctor, surgery, and to do shopping. And the complaints last winter were quite unbelievable.
Councillor Nicholson.
Thank you. I'm going back to cycling pass again, but I noticed that the council's match funding is £145,000 for the community links programme. Now, I'm all for these cycling pass, cycling routes. I think it's a good idea, but we come back to again there's no budget for the maintenance of these cycle paths, and whilst we're expanding overall, and it's a good thing that's happening. I do worry about the state of the paths, state of some of the paths in the areas. Just now, I wouldn't cycle up, I wouldn't use them, brambles going over them and all that, and there's no maintenance to that. One of the things I've been asked to ask is that on DG1, the proposed cycle link between Brick Street and Hooslonan, that has been delayed for obvious reasons because DG1
you know, the work that's going to be done there, and money has been transferred to B, which is Mill Road, Mill Green. Will that cycle link still be going ahead in the following year, or after the work in DG1 has been carried out, or not? Will there still be a budget for that? Another thing I want to ask in 6.12, you know, again, you know, where it's practical for to do so, existing footways can be used as cycle paths, and that I agree with, but I don't agree with them just being put in place, which was the case in Lockside Road. It was put in place, and then they're asking for permission for to actually make it a permanent cycle path on the pavement. There are issues up there with residents. There are issues about it's a well-used path for near a school for kids using it. So there are some safety issues that that needed to get taken into consideration. And the ones that's proposed in 6.12, I hope there's going to be proper consultation with the residents and consultation with the local councillors before any before them pass a procedure with lining for cycling.
Thanks. So just come back to some of those points raised by Councillor Nicholson. We have a discrete line in the budget that we introduced this year for cycleways at 100,000, and the objective there was to try and use that for co-funding to draw down against the kind of sus-strands of the Transport Scotland funding for cycling and walking. As a council, we do have a number of initiatives or priorities to deliver in terms of the local transport strategy, the road safety plan, in terms of sustainable travel, and through the Go Smart scheme and working with Swestrans. We're very much take an approach where we look to, where possible, introduce schemes where we can promote cycling and walking, and we have a number of targets, one in particular in the SOA to look at and increase cycling and walking as a means of transport. And to that end, a number of these projects have been taken forward, and there is particularly a lot of these schemes have to do with the Dumfries town area that we're looking at, and we're looking at where we can use some of the road space, some of the footway space, and safely reapportion that so that we can make cycling safer for those that do, but also encourage people as an alternative means of transport in terms of increase their options if they want to cycle and move about that way in the town. The DG1 link in the future, we're talking about delaying that project. I would say that it certainly, if we're identifying it here as a priority for funding, it's certainly something that we keep on the radar and look at the timescales of any works at that location. And certainly one that, if we've identified it as a viable scheme now, we have the funding. We're looking to continue that funding in future years through this committee. That will be agreed within the infrastructure asset class. And it's certainly something that we can keep on the radar. In terms of consultation, I'll take a look at that in terms of, I think certainly a lot of cycling schemes, and we've certainly had reports to this committee, and we've had a number of meetings with ward members where we have taken cycling schemes forward. There is occasionally resistance in the community to seeing changes in some of these ways, and we're aware that we need to just consider members' views on that, as we have done with a number of schemes in the past. In terms of the maintenance issue, yes, I think that's something that I can certainly take up with DG first. The capital programme here is for new works and for developing or significant improvements to existing works, and certainly there are issues in terms of the maintenance budget needing to address some of these cycle paths and cycle routes as well.
Councillor Nicholson, you.
Thank you. Just to come back on the footways issue, you know, this is what happened in Lockside, for example. They made the lines for the cycle path on the pathway itself months ago, and then they've asked for permission to do it. Now the community council went against us for reasons on safety reasons, because as it's near a school, there's kids use it, and there's a church there. A lot of people use it, prams, etc. Without any consultation, that was put there, and then they asked for permission. I wouldn't like to see that happening, especially in some of these other areas. The Portland Road area, there is a new health centre there. It's going to be a busy place. It is a busy place, and I wouldn't like to think that people are walking along and residents are being disenfranchised from the pathways.
we'll take these points on board for the future schemes.
Councillor Geddes.
Thanks, Chairman. First of all, an apology. I wasn't here when you were taking I came on at the tail end of your declarations of interest. I would want it noted in relation to this particular item so that I am a member of Sederunt's board. That does not preclude me in any way, shape or form for considering this item of business, but I'd be grateful if it could all be belatedly be noted. Turning to the substantive, Chairman, box, page 55, and Appendix 4, talking about flood risk management and about the, in Whitestown in particular, the repairs recently to the Newton Stewart retaining wall, done expeditiously. My understanding is that they've been much appreciated by, among others, the local flood action group. The thrust of my question, sir, would be that we're still awaiting an outcome report from that group which will indicate additional work which will be needed and flag up the resource implications of these. Can I ask, sir, how it would be anticipated, in fact, that we meet the expenditure involved in that necessary additional remedial work? Thank you.
Can I just clarify? I'm assuming, Councillor Geddes, you're talking about the flood study that we're doing in Newton Stewart. Right, thanks. What work is moving forward with that, with the consultants on the hydraulic modelling and looking at options. We're almost in a position there where we would want to take back the findings of that study to the flood action group, the Cree Valley Flood Action Group, and we reckon that would happen within the next few weeks or within the next month in terms of providing them some feedback. I know there has been an interim meeting in terms of data gathering just to inform that study. That will then leave us with a number of options to look at in terms of interventions in Newton Stewart, and an idea of what the costs might be and the kind of impact. I think at that point we would then need to consider, we'd need a mandate from this committee if we come back with the detail, if this committee wanted to bid for funding to take any of these works forward through the capital investment strategy for the council. I think at the same time we also need to see how it sits with the work that's coming out. There's a later report in this committee on the Flood Risk Management Act, how it sits with the development of strategies and interventions for Newton Stewart as a potentially vulnerable area. But I would imagine that Newton Stewart probably does. It features quite highly in terms of the council's risk assessment in the past. So there's a bit of work to do just to thrash out the options and meet with the flood action group. But I think in the future we're probably going to have to bring back another report to seek members' guidance on where they want to go with that as a project.
Councillor Gad.
Thanks, Chairman. That's very helpful indeed.
Councillor Wood.
Actually, just going on to that point about risk assessment, can we have a reassurance that the risk assessment policy is being adhered to? And could you remind me as to exactly what our risk assessment policy is? And can you substantiate the risk assessments that have been taken within the various parts of this report? For example, when you take Stranraer West Pier, I would have thought that within a risk assessment, we would have evaluated that there was a high risk it would go over budget. I would have thought that within the Burn Statue Dumfries project, there would have been a high risk that there might have been design revision. That's just two of the items that's within this report. And once I have those answers, I would also like to know, and that is, are there areas within our risk policy that need to be made more robust?
I could just maybe come back on the West Pier then again. In terms of significant projects, major projects, we look at there is a risk assessment process, and we should be sitting down and identifying risks and management of the risks and potential mitigation interventions. I think in terms of the West Pier Stranraer, I think there was always a realisation that being a marine environment, a lot of the elements of the structures are difficult to get to. There is a lot of risk associated with potential higher outturn costs. The likes of maybe just to skip to the Whitesands scheme again, works involving water and designs. There's a certain amount in terms of the approach to managing risk there on cost uncertainty. We apply what we call optimism bias. At certain levels of design in the project, we might add 60% onto the cost of the scheme. As the design develops, we might add 30% onto the cost of the scheme. So some of the significant larger schemes, we're looking at applying an optimism bias in the cost estimate to try and manage where unknowns become tangible and we associate a cost with them and there's an impact on the project, or we suffer from project creep because there's another element of the works adjacent we need to take in. Smaller projects like the West Pier, the risk assessment kind of happens as the project goes along, but I think there we were always quite certain that there would be the potential, and we had written into the contract the opportunity to instruct on site for variation to works and additional works. Likewise, we might have found elements that didn't need replaced, and we could have instructed that some of the existing elements were retained in place.
Thank you, Chair. I think there was actually more points that I raised and I haven't had answers to, and that was to refresh my memory as to what our risk policy is within your department. And it was also about, can you substantiate, which you have partially done, although not within the reports. And what I'm looking for as an elected member would be much more information on your risk assessments within the actual report, and not having a statement within item 8, the impact assessment at the end, which we get at the end of every report, which gives us no indication at all as to the risks that this council is taking. Now, if we are going to be, manage our risks properly, I would hope that we will now start to reflect on those risks within our reports in a much more comprehensive way. I think I would find that extremely helpful. I'm not sure about other members, but I certainly would.
Just to come back, Councillor, I mean, obviously there's a corporate policy in terms of risk management within the council that we would all be seeking to adhere to. Specifically within planning and environment services, we do have project risk management guidelines that are there for project managers to follow on significant projects. I think possibly what you're asking, or my interpretation of maybe what you're asking this committee to consider is that within the capital monitoring reports, yes, maybe for these major schemes, if that's over £100,000 or over £50,000, some appropriate threshold, that you would maybe want to see within the appendices the summary risk matrix showing what the risks are identified and how they're being managed.
Absolutely, yes.
I've got Councillor Peacock and then Councillor Mayo and then Councillor Nicholson is the second time speaker.
Thank you, Chair. On the road structural maintenance on page 52 of the report under the projects in Annandale and Eskdale, Central Avenue and Gretna, it's noted there that the project has been cancelled because it was patched under the revenue budget. Now, I'd like to know from officers as to who and why that decision was made. The particular project was informed to us as local members that this would be taken forward and the Central Avenue itself would be resurfaced. This information was therefore passed on to the community councils. And since then, we're repeatedly being asked when the project is going to be continued. And, throughout the coming months, we said, well, it is projecting, it is costed and budgeted for, and it will happen. And then we get this report showing that it has now been cancelled. Now, officers have taken that decision without consultation with local members. We are going to have to go back to the community council now, and we are the ones that are going to take the flak for this, because the state of that road is, as it says in the report, patched. And it was patched because of the amount of insurance claims that were coming into the council because of the state of the road in the first place. So as far as I'm concerned, it was a temporary patching job, although the patching was first time permanent, I appreciate that. But still, it was a temporary measure as far as I'm concerned. And that particular project should still have been continued. It is budgeted for, it was programmed, and then all of a sudden we find here that officers have taken the decision to cancel that. And I'd like some answers on that, please.
I think we'd probably need to do a bit of research just to get to the bottom of that, Councillor, but in terms of the details, certainly it's a decision that we can remit to our colleagues in DG First to manage the overall programme. If there are works, some of the projects here have changed because there's been works done, like surface dressing works have been determined to be the most appropriate intervention, so they're possibly moved out of the surfacing scheme into a surface dressing scheme. I don't have the detail for this particular road, the C69A Central Avenue, but I can certainly find that out. And I think there's maybe a bit of an issue in terms of I need to agree a process with DG First where some of these decisions are possibly not being communicated effectively.
Councillor Peacock.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I mean, I could appreciate it if it was a minor road, but this is the main road in front of the High Street in Gretna. And just to say that it's been patched or it may be resurfaced, to say, no, that's not acceptable. I mean, a surface dressed, I apologise. That's not acceptable. I mean, consultation should be taken with local members on this.
Councillor Mayo.
Yeah, wasn't planning to speak on that, but I'd like to back up Councillor Peacock, because through the master plan, this was one of the pieces of work that was seen as one of the ways forward. And indeed, there was a meeting last night just showing what the master plan looks like, and that was still in the plan that road is going to be resurfaced, or redone. So I would agree with Councillor Peacock. We need to get to the bottom of this one. I was going to pick up on page 55, flood risk management, the very bottom one, Langham, substantially complete, awaiting final report. Now, we've had massive problems in the Homewood area there, where there have been many meetings between council officers, Scottish Water, local councillors, local residents, and there seemed to be still a major problem along the back of that hill. So I just would like some reassurance that we actually have got to the bottom of this and that is going to be sorted.
The report from RPS on the flood risk associated with the Esk and the main watercourses in Langham, the final draft version has been received. That was also extended to include works that you have particular concerns about, which is runoff from the hills on both sides that have caused problems last year. That element of the work is still outstanding, and we're chasing RPS for that work. But as soon as that's available, then Brian and myself will be back to local members with the outcomes of that work. I I appreciate it's not maybe progressed as fast as you'd like, but it hasn't been forgotten about.
Thanks, Chair.
Councillor Nicholson.
Thank you. Apologies, Chair. I meant to ask this earlier on. It's on the road safety programme in the A76, Glasgow Road Junction with the A75 roundabout. There's possible works being identified and agreed with Police Scotland. Could you actually tell us what these are? And discussions are being held with the Scotland Transfer, because it's a trunk road aspect of it. I've had issues before in this roundabout. There's no white line in there at all now to distinguish between lanes coming up to the actual roundabout itself. At the moment, there's no give way signs. The roundabout, you can go 60 mile an hour in the roundabout because it is on the A75 coming off the dual carriageway, the bypass. So are these the kind of issues that's been talked about now to resolve?
I'll come back to you, direct, Councillor, on that with details of what we're proposing there. We don't have the detail within the report as a scheme.
Councillor Diggle.
Thank you, Chair. Just prompted by Councillor Geddes, I'm also a substitute director of Whitesands, but I don't intend to leave the meeting for anything. I'd just like to say I welcome the proposed improvements to the A708 Moffat to Selkirk. I was just wondering whether there is a specific stretch that has been identified for improvement.
It's a number, in terms of the A708 improvements, we're looking at using funding that we'd already had approved by this committee within the Strategic Roads Programme and also within the Forestry Discrete Routes Programme. And we're looking at a total value of a bid for... We have a bid into Forestry Commission Scotland through the Strategic Timber Transport Fund as a scheme, and we're looking to put up the council funding and have that topped up, and we understand that bid will be reviewed next week by Forestry Commission. It's a mixture of works in terms of surfacing and drainage works on the road. There has been some investment in the past, but there's a number of areas that are needing structural strengthening again. At the same time, if we get the full amount of the fund through the Strategic Timber Transport Fund for the bid, we'd also be looking at some verge protection works and some of the barrier works that are required just to maintain the structure of the road. And we think the total of the council funding and the bid is about £800,000, I've been told.
Councillor Prentice.
Thanks, Chair. It's actually on page 53, the roads programme at the bottom, the one at On at Parton Mill, the A713, I see it has been delayed again due to investigation works. This I presume is where the road floods when Loch Ken is in flood, and the road actually becomes closed because of the flooding. And it has been in the cards for a number of years that part of the road of maybe a couple of 100 yards, I would estimate, could be raised maybe by 18 inches or so, which would alleviate the problem when Loch Ken does go into flood. I'm just curious to know why it has been delayed for investigation works again. I mean, what are we investigating? It's quite obvious what the problem is.
Again, I'll check on the detail on that and come back to you direct on the works that have been carried out by DG first and why we've incurred a delay on that particular scheme. So.
Councillor Martin.
Thanks, Chair. Page 54, under roads lighting, we've got the U272N, Kirtland Road, Georgetown, complete. I'm just wondering what work was actually carried out in Kirtland Road. I knew there were new LED lights put in Round Bank Road, but as I say, I'm not aware of any work that was done in Kirtland Road. I don't know if that's a typo. It should be Round Bank Road or the wrong road's been done.
It should be Round Bank. Apologies for that. It's the works that appear under this programme, it's the LED replacement is separately reported, but the works that appear under the roads lighting report here is as the kind of safety works and the replacement of the columns themselves. So we should have referenced that as Round Bank.
Thanks. There's no more speakers. I'll move to recommendations after asking for a summing up of the extra information that is going to be passed to individual members regarding particular schemes.
I assume the officer has a note of these. Just bear with me. Yeah. I was about the cancellation of the U769A. Come back to Councillor Peacock on the details of that. Yeah, Councillor Nicholson about the A76, A75 roundabout work. The officer will come back on more information on that. And at Parton Mill, the roads programme's delayed. Councillor Prentice was seeking further information on that. I think that was all the points.
Chair, it was the C69A, not the U69 in Gretna.
As I said, I'm sure the officer has a note of all these.
Just to add in the information that's required for the Glenluce, New Luce Road for Councillor Tuckfield. Move to recommendations now. Are members prepared to note the financial progress updates on individual projects, programmes within 13-14 Economic Development and Infrastructure Asset Class Capital Programme allocations as reflected in the appendix? And note the progress of the Economic Development Capital Programme in Appendix 3. Note the progress of the Infrastructure Asset Class Capital Programme in Appendix 4. And agree that the Auchencairn Carsfair Ice Prediction Sensor Site Camera installation be added to the Road Structural Maintenance Programme. Agree that the C22W Durnow-Kirkham and the C47W Strone Bridge projects be substituted with the A708 Moffat to Selkirk route protection. The remaining funding for the Forestry Routes Discrete Schemes programme be allocated to the A708 project, and that any potential grant award from the Forestry Commission Scotland for the A708 be accepted by this committee. And agree that Stranraer West Quay Wall be added to the coastal infrastructure.
Clarification there, sir. I meant to raise it, earlier. C22 Durnow-Kirkham. It's C22 Durnow-Kirkgowan, surely. I take it there's no roads that could come, otherwise my colleague here would have been asking why have it been delayed.
For it to go through, Chair?
No doubt.
Yeah, I certainly know the C22W is nowhere near Kirkham. Noted, we're happy to agree with that, the change to the recommendation.
I'm certainly not happy to agree it, but I'll live in the real world, so I'll accept it, albeit grudgingly.
My apologies for using that word again. agree the West Quay wall be added to coastal infrastructure programme and funding be accelerated from the 14-15 infrastructure asset class programme as required. Agree that any potential underspend of the Stranraer flood protection scheme budget allocation be reallocated to the flood risk management programme. Accept the Sistrans Community Links 13-14 offer a grant funding of 289,250. Councillor Nicholson?
Yeah, I agree with that, but there's information to come back on the maintenance budget for the cycle pass. I don't know whether it be included in that or whether, you know, the next three, the 28, 29, 210, you know, where we're actually getting the money for maintenance of these pass, and whether there's any identified budget, or whether we need to, you know, ask for more money for these from policy resources. And also whether the DG1 cycle pathway is actually going to go ahead in the future.
Yeah, we can come back with that information to yourself, Councillor Nicholson, or to everybody that's on the committee without actually putting into the recommendations if you're willing to accept that. Yeah, so we've accepted the Sistrans Community Link 13-14 offer a grant funding for the 289,250. Accept to offer a grant from the Landfill Communities Fund 13-14 of 30,000 for the Dumfries to Maybe cycle path. And accept to offer a grant funding of 158,000 from Transport Scotland for cycling, walking and safer streets project identified in paragraphs 6.8 to 6.15. I'll move on to item 8. It's a presentation by Mr MacLeod, Mr Sire, I believe, on the Dumfries Town Centre Whitesands master plan.
Freezing in here this morning. So what, sorry? Oh, right. I was going to say that we're going to do this presentation in two parts, and I'm going to be the warm-up act, but that couldn't be further from the truth. Back in the earlier part of this year, the members asked us to go away and look at the specific design of the Whitesands and to come back with further detail. I would stress at this point that the project is twofold. It's certainly about bringing forward a design solution for flood protection measures that provide a 1 in 25-year level of protection. But it also, importantly, it's a public realm project, which looks at not just providing an engineering solution for the flooding issues, but also dealing with some of the urban decay and blight that we have around the Whitesands. And that's what we've been working on over the last 6 months or so, is to look at actually how we do both and how we can add to the regeneration of the town centre. I'm going to use my laser pointer on this. I hope everybody can follow it. Can everyone see that? That red dot at the top. This is an outline plan of the proposals that we've been looking at for the Whitesands, and we have slightly extended the work that we did at the Charette this time last year. So we've been looking at the Greensands area, looking at how we integrate that into the overall design proposal, and also further south looking at the area around the Dot Park and how that integrates with the Whitesands proposal. But all taken as a coherent plan, what we're looking to do with this is to ensure that we protect the existing visual amenity along the riverside. So the riverside walk will be retained, But obviously, as part of providing the flood protection measures, we're going to be building an embankment along the length of the Whitesands that will have a visual impact. But it might block the view in certain areas of the river, but certainly not all of them. And that walk, uninterrupted walk, will continue along from the Green Sands and all the way down into Dock Park. The images and slides that will come later on in this presentation, and you'll be able to refer to some of the illustrations that you've got as appendices in the report, show a lot of the illustrations about how the design of the embankment will work. But essentially, what we will be looking to do is to improve the visual appearance of the Whitesands and improve over time, the condition of the urban edge of the town, which is a key asset to the town centre. We currently don't use the river to the full extent because this area of the Whitesands is dominated by car parking. That won't be the case in the future. But the works that we're going to be doing in the public realm will displace the car parking down at this end and will create a green embankment. There's also the potential to create a whole range of elements to the design, such as putting steps that could actually double up as seating on the embankment overlooking what would otherwise have become an urban square in this area. We've allowed for the design of a people space in this area that coincides with events that we've held in the town centre in the past, such as the Tour of Britain, but also the Big Burn Supper and any other events that we decide to have in the town. This very much becomes a part and parcel of the public realm, an area where people gather. The long-term aspiration around improving the public realm here is very much about generating people, creating a pleasant walking environment along the riverside, allowing people to leisurely enjoy this space, whether it be walking, whether it be cycling, or whether it just be sitting and spending time in this space, is very much about attracting people. Where you attract people, you actually create a self-sustaining regeneration effect that hopefully will impact on all of these businesses down at this end. Where we generate people, hopefully we will generate custom. The other aspect of this, as I've already mentioned, car parking will be displaced from this area. We have been looking at increasing the capacity of car parking in a more formalised way around the Green Sands area. Creating more car parking here also potentially creates more people. Creating a more attractive environment also attracts people to utilise this space. Hopefully that might get people utilising these bridge crossings and generate more people in this area, because at the moment that doesn't happen. It's a very informal area which used to be occupied by the swimming pool. It no longer is. Generating more people in this finer grain of the town actually makes this much more of a destination, as well as dealing with some of the flooding issues that James will cover shortly. We've also looked at some of the finer grain around this area of the town, increasing the permeability and attractiveness for people to walk through it. In particular, one of those areas is Brewery Street and the potential link under Buccleuch Street, actually increasing and making more attractive some of the tertiary parts of the town. I think I've spoken before at committee about the weaknesses in the town being the secondary and tertiary areas, where you move away from the activity on the high street. In a thriving economy, you would expect the first turn off the high street to be a busy, very busy, both in terms of shops, but also in terms of people generation. And then the third turn off is less busy, but nevertheless still has people activity on it. As soon as you turn off the high street in the town centre, you're already into almost tertiary areas, not secondary ones. and our tertiary areas simply are virtually anonymous. So this work around this area enables us to start to address some of these issues of the tertiary grain in the town. The link under Buccleuch Street is something that we feel has potential. We'd like to explore that. It makes this area altogether more attractive for people to park, especially if you formalise this. At the other end, around Dock Park, we've also looked at car parking, increasing the capacity slightly, also throttling back the width of the carriageway here. It's currently quite wide at that point, dominated by cars, dominated by vehicles. It's actually quite difficult to cross at this area where it's quite busy. So actually, by doing something relatively simple, by narrowing the carriageway, increasing car parking capacity around here, actually increases the visual attractiveness of this area that will link in well with the investment that we're putting into the Dock Park entrance here at the moment. This will take on a completely different feel once these projects are completed. And this becomes a much more attractive part of the town, would have very much more of a secondary feel to it rather than, at the moment, a tertiary traffic-dominated feel to the town. You also get the feel that this would be much more of an attractive vista looking down here with green embankments, hopefully lots of people activity. Importantly, and something which I see as being a big priority, is linking in with our infrastructure, the bridges across the Nith, which we currently don't make so much of. And that's because, this area is dominated by car parks. So the bridges across here very much become part and parcel of the project. The public realm will be an integral feature to this, because as we provide for people spaces and encourage people to utilise this as a walkway and leisure activity, then we draw attention to the pedestrian and the vehicular crossings. So as part of this, we will also be looking at comprehensive lighting initiative for the public realm and make this a key feature for the town. This has the potential to attract people into Dumfries and become much more of a destination rather than a car parking destination that it is currently. So I'll leave you with those thoughts about the public realm. I'm going to hand over to James, who'll take you through the flooding components.
Thank you. What I'm going to do is the plan that you've just seen was laid on its side, and I'll work my way down through 4 sections just to give you an idea. So Greensands to Evergilla Bridge. As Jason said, we're looking at improving car parking in the Greensands area. And you will see the number 3s refer to an area around the standard office and such like, and flood protection measures there to protect both that office and prevent water then getting into the back of barbers and such like. And what follows now is 2 or 3 sort of images that you will have seen either during presentations to political groupings, or if you attended the public display on the 21st and 22nd of August at the Baker's Oven. These images were there. So you can see some of the ideas that are part of the scheme. They're not 100% tied up with, they're aspirational but potentially deliverable as well. And what we're looking at here is an idea for accessing the Greensands from the car park at the Art College, and potentially improving access underneath Buccleuch Street, a level access utilising Brewery Street as it is at present, which is underutilised, and you can't actually access through to the Greensands. So it's an option. As we move south of Buccleuch Street Bridge, you'll see the cycle path continues. It's marked as, you can see the red dot, NR7 here. This would be the only location where the cycle path would actually coincide with the pedestrian movements as we bring the cycle path up to the end of the old bridge. And the intention here is that the embankment
would be slightly higher than required for flood protection levels, but would tie in with the end of the old bridge, removing the need for stepped access off that. So as part of the protection works, we're also improving pedestrian access, disabled access, pushchairs and so on, with ramps that lead both south and north from that east side of the bridge. Jumping on to the next section, so we go from the old bridge down to the sandy opening. This is primarily the defences here provided by an embankment, as Jason has discussed, set back from the river's edge, set back from the current retaining wall, so retaining the existing cycle path walkway facility along the river's edge, but putting a further walkway along the top of the embankment, which we would see as a kind of mooching or walking area along the top of the embankment, rather than as a through route, so it would give people time to spend time there. And that shows one of the details at the sandy opening as a possible design detail, which is kind of a bit out there, in as much as we're looking at a flood defence with a big hole in it. But this would allow a visual aspect down Bank Street and from the High Street to the river. And the flood defence element there would be provided by gates located underneath the bridge that would be closed upon issue of a warning. But what it does, it provides a feature to the scheme that we think would be a public realm improvement, as well as still providing flood protection measures. There's even a sort of play park element there at the bottom end, and that's a couple of views. The top view is looking from the green from the Deer Park side back up towards the town, so you can see how the bridge, and you can see the vehicles below the bridge, and then looking the other way is looking down towards the river. Taking the sort of third section of from sandy opening down to the dock head, here we're obviously reducing in available space for an embankment. So primarily the defences would be provided by walling rather than an embankment. And here is a detail at this is at the Domino's Pizzas, is where the two cars are parked at the moment, and that we draw in there. So you can see that as the space becomes less available, we go from a wall, we go from the embankment into the wall. And at the first section there, we intend putting sort of gates within that wall to allow pedestrian access through, because there isn't access directly onto the embankment at that point. South of that, you'll see that the detail changes to a walling, and this shows that this is if I just flick back, this is a view. This view here, the next one is the same location, but looking from the other side of the river across. So you can see the idea of the gates on the left-hand side of the picture there, coming to the start of the embankment, and then beyond that, looking at a large barrier here, a 2-metre high barrier, which the detail we've got shown on the plans is a wall of approximately 1 metre high. Seating arrangement as a potential on this, with above that a glass barrier, a glass wall barrier. The report refers to the potential that this barrier could be alternatively replaced by a temporary barrier that would be erected at the time of a warning. But this level of detail isn't finalised yet. So, I mean, this is a barrier that's going to be in the order of 2 metres high, so it's going to be reasonably significant. But the space that's going to be available on either side of the barrier, the footways will be widened on the roadside, and this would still be quite a wide space, so it's not as though you're going to be kind of constricted between. So that's the kind of ideas in this location. And lastly, moving down to the sort of southern end of the scheme and Dock Head, and opposite on the other side at Welldale and at Dock Park. The Dock Head area, we would look, as Jason's mentioned, to look at the opportunities for narrowing the junction at the junction with St Michael Street Bridge. That hasn't been fully calculated in terms of, we haven't gone into a level of detail in terms of traffic capacity, and obviously that's an issue with that junction. But there is an additional space in that junction that's probably unnecessary for all of that. So there may be the potential to improve both the public realm adjacent to the river, the defences, as we've shown here, between the suspension bridge and St Michael's Bridge, but also retain as much of the parking there as possible. South of that, switching over to the other side of the river, this is a sketch that was produced just recently as part of this programme, and this shows a view from the bridge looking north on the west side of the river, showing the necessity for defences at Welldale. The defences there would be in embankments and walling as such, but they're actually pretty low in comparison to the properties. Generally, the defences would be not much different from the height of the fencing or boundary planting that's on the properties anyway. The properties to the south of the bridge are actually higher than the levels that we're protecting in terms of flooding. So it would really be protection to the access road there that you can see. The last slide here, in terms of detail, shows a recently produced detail for issues at Linden Grove, where we've been looking at localised protection, and the proposal here, as you can probably see, involves any of you that are aware of Linden Grove. It has properties with a small wall around it, and what we're intending is rebuilding that wall to encompass the property. And you can see in the top view, in the full view of the property, that the wall would continue round the back, and the same detail produced on the other side, and that would prevent any water accessing either into the side of the property or around the back of the property. And at the front, obviously, to retain the views, then we would keep the wall low, but the potential to install temporary defences. So that's a detail, that's an option that would be to fit in with the existing construction. So we would be looking at sandstone facing and such like. And finally, I just leave you with the couple of the shots that were as part of the public display. So this is a view from the call looking across. Obviously, the call's taking quite a large element of this. And if I flick to the next picture, what we'll see is the embankment and the impact it has on the view. And I think what I'll try and point out, if I go back, there is if I can get it across, there's a van parked about here, a white van. And you can see that the embankment isn't significantly large in comparison to the visual aspect of what's available on the other side. And the other view, which was taken from a camera on a big stick on top of the old bridge, looks down the sands, and this was the sort of before shot, and this gives you an idea of what we hope it will look like in the future. So what we've currently got, what we hope to get. That concludes my part of the presentation.
I would just like to thank Mr MacLeod and Mr Sires for their presentation. Now move on to item 9, the actual report on the Whitesands Project Flood Protection Scheme and Public Realm Improvements. Is there anything to add to the contents of the report?
Nothing to add at this stage, Chair. Thank you.
Councillor Martin.
Thanks, Chair. Say thank you for the report. The report there, the thing. But although we support the project in principle, there's still major issues with the car parking. As I say, we can't allow a project like this to fall simply because we dismiss the legitimate concerns for the public and the traders over the loss of car parking. The recommendation on the parking at present is pretty weak. When you see what's happening there, it's clear the aim is just to say, when you go onto page 66, 270, the parking there, as I say, the strategy. We've been promised a car parking strategy for the town centre for years, and yet nothing's there. We've never got anything yet. I see we're supposed to be getting a report back, but I don't know when that is. And to tie it in with this, it's no use saying the traders are there, like, but the argument officers put forward when against removing the buses for Burn Square was to do with the footfall. As I say, the buses help the footfall in the shops near Burn Statue, but they can't have it both ways. We're saying that it's different in relation to cars in the Whitesands. Any parking has to be established in a way that maintains a similar footfall for the businesses. We need recommendations to something like the report to agree on the parking that sets out clearly alternative parking provision to replace the 250 places. It's all right saying that now we've got to be extra parking at the Green Sands, extra parking at the other end at the dock park end, the dock head. But I say that's got cold comfort to the traders in the Whitesands, because you can't see much footfall arriving for the dock head or the or the Greensands to the shops there, as I say, because James said there now, like, maybe if Brewery Street was there, but as I say, that's just an aspiration according to James at present. So, as I say, there's no guarantee that extra parking at Greensands is going to help any of these traders, like. It's just, as I say, it just beggars belief that we've not actually, the time that we've taken in this report, we've not actually got to the point where we can actually say what's happening in the parking. As I say, it just seems to be a wish list. The additional parking at Greensands, Dock Park, existing capacity within the town centre. Another thing that we've got to say there as well, like, as I say, it's good to see Linden Grove, but we've had a lot of representations for the people from Linden Grove about when they attended the consultations. It just seemed to be like the one option was there. But it does say, I think it is in the report, that there will be proper liaison. The final solution will be a balance between the views between the property owners and occupiers. I just hope there has got to be proper consultation with the residents of Linden Grove. If they're not happy with what they've seen there now, I don't know. As I say, they've got to be proper consultation, because we've got to avoid a repeat of what happened at Burn Square, when we gave the officers a blank cheque to do what they want once we had rubber stamped this project, and it was an absolute fiasco. It blew up in our faces with the buses, etc. So I think we've really got to make sure that there's proper consultation. And I don't know if this is the final draft, but I would say we've got to get a final report on the design, taking into view all the consultations with residents of Linden Grove, etc., before we push ahead, because this is it's a project it's changed the riverside. It's got to change the riverside for more or less for good, and we need to take the people with us, be listening to what they're saying, and not just pushing ahead and doing what we want. As I say, we've done that before, and it's blew up in our face. And I would hate to see a project like this, which I broadly support, but I would hate to see it fail because we can't come up with a proper project on a proper parking strategy for the residents and for the residents and traders in the Whitesands area.
Mr. Sir?
What I would say in answer to that is that we've gone away and we've been looking at designing flood protection measures, and totally accept the points that you're making on car parking. I think there are a number of options that we are currently looking at, and Stephen may want to address the issues of the car parking strategy that's currently underway or about to report back. But as part of the design work that we did during the charrettes, we identified a potential site on the Whitesands that could have the potential to address a substantial amount of the car parking that was being displaced. And that's an option. The council currently don't own that site, but it shouldn't be discounted because of that. So it will take time to assemble the solution for car parking, and I don't think that there is necessarily one solution for car parking. There are a number. That's the reason that we looked at formalising the area around the Greensands, because we felt that there was potentially additional capacity there. Also looking at a small, but nevertheless additional capacity down at the Dockhead area. As well as looking at car parking potential around the town as is existing, but all within a 5-minute walking catchment of the town centre. I think I'll pass across to Stephen to answer the question on the car parking strategy.
The issue with the parking strategy is that this committee, our Planning and Environment Services Committee as it was back in 2006, adopted a parking strategy for the town and removed one of the elements of the recommendations, which was to do with parking charges. And to a certain extent, a lot of what was in the strategy was predicated on the fact that there was an income stream generated to deliver some of the aspirations in the parking strategy. So there is a bit of an issue that we have a parking strategy that has partially been implemented and probably needs to be refreshed and revisited. In terms of how that sits with the Whitesands scheme, we've revisited some of the survey work that parking strategy was developed from. There was detailed surveys done back in 2005. We've refreshed those over the start of the summer months in the appropriate months in terms of kind of road usage. And through June, there was a number of parking surveys done in the town centre. and we're looking at the data that's coming back from that in relation to some of the previous recommendations to take forward in the parking strategy. But we think, as Jason says, that we're certainly convinced that there is a number of possible solutions to mitigate and to look at the capacity and demand in the town and to deal with the fact that there's a number of spaces been taken out. We reckon there's about 230 spaces been taken out in the Whitesands area, both in the off-street and the on-street parking. And we reckon that the improvements at the Greensands area will put about another 50 spaces back in. The report here identifies a number of other options that we need to investigate, and as Jason says, that might go as far as looking at an alternative site and seeing what provision we can make there. We see, certainly from the consultation, just to come back on the issue on the consultation, I feel there's been quite significant consultation on this project through the charrette process, through the meeting in the spring and through the 2 days that we just had a couple of weeks ago and with the details that were coming before. And I know out of that, some of the detail has come, or some of the detail as it's emerging in the design has come to residents and some of the traders, and we've certainly had discussions with them on that and are starting to get feedback on some of their concerns in terms of accessibility, in terms of parking, in terms of in Linden Grove, just the kind of final form and how that looks. And we see that through the design process, as the design evolves, that kind of consultation will keep pace with that. But I think very much part of the design process is also to address the parking and to take that forward in a kind of similar timescale. And we do identify that there's probably a number of options that need to be considered there to come to solution, and that would be most appropriately brought back to this committee.
Yeah. As I say, I can understand the long term. The traders, it doesn't seem to be their main concern is not the long term parking, which I would imagine the majority of people that park in the Greensands. I don't know if that's going to be long term, short term, what it's going to be, but it seems to be taking away the parking spaces where this new bus interchange is going to be. I think it's the short term parking that is really the traders are going to miss out on because of the footfall. Even off the buses now, coming off the buses now, as I say, they get off at the top of the Whitesands at present, but now they're going to be further down, and it's going to be the traders at the top end of the town that's got to lose out with the bus interchange between the buses being moved down to the outside where the two car parking spaces. I take it they're the two you're talking about that have been identified. It may take up extra parking, but the buses are going to be down there, and the car parking has been removed from there, so the traders at the top end of the Whitesands, they're the ones that's got to be hit really hard.
In terms of the parking at the top end of the Whitesands, at present there's parking available adjacent to the shops as well as a bus stop outside the dance studio. Those spaces and that bus stop shall remain. Likewise, the parking that's on the opposite side of the road, outside the public toilets, will also remain.
Just quick in there. So what we're saying is the drop-off point for the buses coming in from the likes of Buccleuch Street will still be at the top end of the Whitesands.
In as much as I can give assurances of that level of detail, there's no requirement to remove that as part of the design of the flood protection works. There's the walling in that location behind the toilets, between the toilets and the river, doesn't obviously impact upon that. So no, not as part of the flood protection works.
Councillor Prentice.
Thanks, Chair. I think, one or two questions need to be answered about what's actually going to happen on the town side of the river when there is a deluge of water like we had in Cockermouth a couple of years ago. I mean, when the river goes into flood, there's going to be huge floods on the town side of the barrier. At the moment, I presume wastewater from properties or wastewater from households is differentiated between that and rainwater or surface water. What happens to the wastewater or the waste products at the moment? And what will happen afterwards when there is a massive deluge of water coming down onto the town and running down there and flooding back up out of the drains? I presume there's going to be pumps or something. I'd like to know what happens to the two different types of water at the moment. I think that it'll be like a lot of other towns in the UK where there's actually a mixture of it in places. So what happens just now and what is envisaged to happen in the future with, I think, pumps going to pump it back over the wall into the net? Is wastewater going to be pumped into the net over the wall?
At present, I'm not sure how much detail you'll want me to go into, but at present, the sewer system in the Whitesands area and for most of Dumfries is a combined system that takes rainwater from roofs and roads, as well as foul water from toilets and baths, sinks, and so on. During times of high flow within the sewers, when it's raining heavily, there is the opportunity for these sewers to discharge directly to the river, and this happens at a number of locations down the Nith. And these can be seen as large flat valves and associated infrastructure. The sewage that comes from these is screened through a 6mm screen, so it's not significantly obvious that it's being discharged in the river, and that's Scottish Water and SEPA, and Scottish Water issue and SEPA monitor that in terms of levels of pollution and dilution that are provided by the river. At times when the river levels are up and the Whitesands and car park and such like is flooded, then you're correct, the manholes will lift, and the manhole covers will lift, and water will come back up the manholes. At the moment, that is in effect masked by the high river levels, so you probably not realise that what's in the Whitesands isn't just river water; it's also sewage. During the once an embankment is built there, then the potential is that the river level will be above the ground level on the protected side. That's the reason for the embankment and the walling. At that time, we would look, as part of the scheme, to incorporate a large pump station to deal with the flows within the combined sewer, and that has been worked up in principle, the sort of an initial design of a pump station to deal with that. So effectively what would happen was as the river levels and levels in the sewer rose during high rainfall events, so that would be water from rain but also foul water, as that rose it would spill over a weir within the sewer system into a pump station that we would construct, and that would then pump into the river through again the screened discharge, would pump the flow into the river, so that would keep the levels in the sewers down at a level that wouldn't cause surcharging, because one of the issues that we have in the Whitesands is that the surcharge sewers, yes, they do come up to road level, but also if you've got a basement property and the sewer levels rise, and there's potential to back up into the basement property, and clearly we want to avoid that. The slight addition to that is that underneath the suspension bridge, there's also discharge from the Lorburn and Milburn, and again, these, when the river levels are high, back up and cause internal flooding at a couple of locations, and a potential to continue to do so if we build the embankments. So again, a similar design of a pump station in and around Nith Place, bottom of Nith Place, to keep the levels within the Lorburn-Milburn outfall at a non-flood level, so minimise the flooding in that regard.
I'll just come back to you. Just a quick question. So I presume all this has been costed, because one is no use without the other.
Yeah, the report, the appendix, the final appendix in the report is the flood protection scheme, but on top of that, I would need to check the paragraph number, but it's the section, section 3.9.3 refers to costs associated with the requirements for pump stations for both the Lorburn and for the combined sewer system. We will have a work to do with Scottish Water in this regard, because there may be improvements that Scottish Water can do within their network that would reduce the requirements of the pump stations for this scheme, and that's something that will be progressed as the scheme develops.
Leader.
Thank you, Chair. I think Councillor Martin hit one of the big issues that will come out from the consultation is the parking and how we actually address that. I would like to think that we actually address that before we decide to take away the other current parking. I think through looking at it, one of the things I would say that if I was a visitor to Dumfries and you had your embankment, I would be looking to come and spend some time there. Currently, it's a walk down the sands. That has seating opportunities. It has different aspects to it that I would think would be more attractive to visitors. So I actually think the parking could be partially offset by the fact that you'll attract more people in there, and the businesses all along the sands would benefit from additional footfall. I think one of the concerns I have taken out of it as well is, will we ever live to see it? This is one of the things, and I would like to think that we would hopefully see some improvement, because A, it solves a 1 in 25 year flooding issue, B, it makes our town look better. So hopefully we can actually deliver this within a reasonable time scale. I don't know what you would call reasonable, but I would like to think I would see it in my lifetime. So I think it's quite a good idea. I welcome the design. There are the parking issues that we hopefully will address before we actually go down the route of this. But the best of luck, and let's hope we see something in the next 4 or 5 years. We'll not be any bolder than that.
Councillor Nicholson.
Yeah, the leader touched on some of the issues as well, but and one of the main issues of getting this project up and going, in principle, we're in favour of this project. There are issues again with the car parking, but one of the biggest issues is going to be the finance, and where we're actually going to get the finance for this. There's no Scottish Government money at the moment, as far as I'm aware. How are we actually going to finance this, and what is the kind of timescale we see to get finances in place and where from, etc. That's going to be the biggest issue. This plan that's in front of me, I take it it's not, it's not a finalised plan. It is a draft plan that will be worked on, and taking into account Councillor Martin's very real issues about the car parking and how it's, how it can be. New car parking scheme can be put in place to mitigate any trader loss, or even actually encourage, the trade in the area. So that's got to be taken into consideration when we're looking at the car parking strategy as well. So it can't be finalised. It's got to be, an ongoing aspect of it. And one of the big issues that you've also got to do when we're going ahead with this plan is to take the public along with us. That is one of the main issues. Public have got very, very rightly so some concerns about what's happening in the area and how this is going to affect different parts of Dumfries, and all that has got to be taken into consideration. The main issue is the car parking issue, but I think that can be overcome. But it's got to be overcome in a way that's not going to affect the trading in the area. I think that's all I want to say at the moment. When we come to the recommendations, maybe we want to firm up some of these recommendations, as Councillor Martin has said. So when we come to that, we'll see the firming up the recommendations.
Mr. Sars?
Yeah, just to confirm that rather than maybe refer to it as a draft plan, it's an emerging plan. I think we were asked to go away and look at the detail of the flood protection measures and what the impact would be on the town, and also to, on the back of that, to establish what the kind of ballpark figure would be for the costs. So we've taken the plan to a certain level of detail. We'll certainly have to refine elements of that plan as we go forward, and the car parking is an integral part of that design process. So we'll continue to evolve car parking solutions, both in terms of within the current capacity within the town, and also align it with the car parking strategy that's currently being revisited.
Councillor Peacock.
Thank Thank you, Chair. Yeah, it's an impressive project, and with some of the issues already raised, of course, and going from the appendices and the public opinions there, it seems to be, in general, well supported. It's just a question on the issue that with the flood protection issues there for the 1 in 25 year floods, and I understand, and going through the financial considerations, it sets out about the cost-benefit ratio and such, so I understand all that. But with some of the planning issues that have been raised elsewhere, and when it comes to flood risk areas, they occasionally talk about coming up to a 1 in 200 year precautions. And I just wonder if Mr MacLeod is satisfied that 1 in 25 year will actually be sufficient to protect the Whitesands area.
Yeah, it's a good question. The level of protection has principally come from a sort of consultation process that has come off the back of committee report in 2011, where the level of defences for a 1 in 200 year were of a sort of significant level that effectively the river and the town would no longer be sort of connected. There would be vast walling and the need for vast walling and such like. So I think the report acknowledges that to a certain extent this is a compromise, and there will be residual, there will be a legacy issue of planning behind the defences because they're only built to a 1 in 25 year level of protection. There's a sort of couple of bits of mitigation to that. First of all, the level of protection of the 1 in 25, we've included a 400 freeboard within the report. Within the design, and that the levels that are shown on the drawings, the levels for each of the elements includes a freeboard. That equates to about a 1 in 75 year level of protection without any freeboard at all. So you're jumping quite a significant sort of likelihood of a flooding occurrence occurring. That isn't a 1 in 200. I acknowledge that, and the consequences of that are that behind the defences there remains issues in terms of planning. Towards the end of last week, I met with planning officers within SEPA. As you're aware, SEPA follows Scottish planning policy, which requires them to consider all planning applications, in this case within a 1 in 200 year flood envelope, and that still remains there. It's important that we have some positive feedback from SEPA that we're not promoting a scheme which is going to effectively still mean that there can be no development behind the defences or redevelopment behind the defences, and that element needs to be worked up in more detail. But the initial feedback, and I reference a meeting on the 5th of September, so obviously I couldn't include that in the report, but the feedback from that meeting was pretty positive in terms of where SEPA would like to see it go. So there's come out of that 2 actions upon myself and colleagues within our planning section as well, and within our emergency planning section, and that's to look at supplementary planning guidance for the area behind the defences that's still within the 1 in 200, and what would we all consider as appropriate development. What we need to be sure of here is that we're looking specifically at the Whitesands and nowhere else. We can't set a sort of policy that covers the whole of Dumfries and allow developers to come in with their ideas for anywhere. And certainly SEPA don't want to see that happening across Scotland. So this is supplementary planning guidance for Dumfries. And it's issues such as what is appropriate development within a flood risk area. And, a nursing home, we would argue I think we would probably all agree is not an appropriate development within a flood risk area. But residential, you're looking at getting out with the 1 in 200, but certainly within the 1 in 1,000. Commercial property, which we've currently got down there, a lot of the commercial property copes with periodic flooding. So that kind of development. It's access and egress issues, and we were working with emergency planning colleagues. We have a flood plan for Whitesands area, so that when we get flood warning and we get, it's getting worse and worse, we have a way that we close the roads that we can evacuate and such like, and that's worked out with emergency planning. We would look to do the same process once this scheme's built to know. Remember, we will still have a 3, and that's going to be improved to a 6-hour warning on a flood event on this area. So, managed approach towards defences. And I think you were going, just to go back to your point about consultation, and I think back to Councillor Nicholson's point about it as well.
flood protection scheme, when it's promoted, doesn't require planning permission. A confirmed flood protection scheme doesn't require planning permission. However, we have to go through promoting the scheme, and at that time, that is subject to people objecting to it. So similar to the flood protection scheme we promoted at Portpatrick, if we get objections to it, then we need to resolve these objections. And if we don't resolve them, we could potentially end up with the local public inquiry and all the costs and challenges. Now, I'm not saying we're not going to end up at local public inquiry, but the more consultation, the more agreement we get to these measures, you know, we're not going to just try and force it through because we, as officers, think it's the best thing.
Councillor Lever. Yeah, my principal question was about the meeting with SEPA and what the outcome was. Because, I mean, we are talking about the difference between regenerating an area which already exists as opposed to developing in an area which is a known flood risk. And I think we need to make that clear to SEPA, otherwise we just end up with a no-go area all within that region of the town centre, which isn't acceptable. It's just an observation, but you know, we've got to spend somewhere in the region of £14 million on the Whitesands. We're already spending £2 million on the Dock Park. It's just a pity we can't actually physically link the two without having to cross the road at St Michael's Bridge. Is there any way in which we could actually bridge that gap, as it were, by going under St Michael's Bridge with continuing the walkway to link into Dock Park? I don't know whether that's feasible or not. And the second point was you were saying about the 1 in 25-year risk, and that was based on the modelling which has been done. I remember a couple of years ago, I think it was, that there was a major period of rainfall and the water was expected to come over the Whitesands in the evening. That never actually happened because our office is at the bottom, so we had the floodgates out, etc., and the water actually went down, and that's because it had breached the bunding up at Dalscone. So, I mean, what effect would the building up the embankments as we are at the moment, or proposing at the moment, in the Whitesands have further upstream? Would there be a knock-on effect in terms of that? My final point is ease of maintenance of these schemes. It's no point in us spending a lot of money building these if within 2 or 3 years, you know, they're begin breaking down again because we can't afford to maintain.
Yeah, I mean, obviously the SEPA question I've probably answered to a previous query. The observation on the links between Dock Park and Dock Head, it's something that actually came up at the charrette process, as well as the potential to sort of put a walkway under the easternmost arch of St Michael's Bridge. I think realistically the level and clearances, it would be quite difficult to do, although I would tend to agree there does need to be something done there. But hopefully, if we can manage and re-engineer improvements in the junction, we'll make a simpler crossing at St Michael's Bridge, at the bottom of St Michael's Bridge. But it's a balance between pedestrians, cyclists, and the road users, and that will be looked at. In terms of the impacts the embankment has upon the flows, clearly what we can't afford to do as part of a flood protection scheme is protect one area and impact upon another. But that's not going to find any favour, and Scottish Government is the kind of thing Scottish Government and SEPA pick up on quite quickly, and SEPA would recommend a Scottish Government that wasn't the best. We have done a model of the scheme. We've taken the design as we're currently showing on the plans, and we've run that through the hydraulic model. Michelle have run that through the hydraulic model, and the impacts are pretty minimal in terms of level differences because of that. Within the Whitesands area, the levels are still protected. With the areas where there is protection, so upstream at the Greensands, there's a small rise in levels at the Greensands, but again, 10s, 20 mil, that kind of level. And downstream, again, insignificant levels. But what we've got is we've got a report on that, and that will be added to our website along with the current technical report showing this additional modelling work that's been done, because that would be required to be provided to justify the scheme. And in terms of maintenance, yes, we would look to design the scheme to be as low maintenance as possible, but there will obviously be the need to have maintenance for shutting gates and such like at high flow events. We clearly can't not have staff available to do that.
Councillor Wood.
Thank you, Chair. Certainly talking to people in and around Dumfries,
I think there's a real appetite to see this go ahead. I think they're keen to see a development down there of this nature. Many people do recognise that there are parking issues, but they would hope that the council can resolve those quite easily. What I was going to say, though, and I think very important, and Councillor Lever touched on it as well, and that is a long-term maintenance of the actual development. Because at the moment, and quite a few people have raised this, if we're not able to make a commitment to the islands that we have down in the river, how are we going to make a commitment to this development? So I think as a council we have to look at showing some sort of degree of support to maintaining what's there at present, and I think you'll get the support from the community to go further.
I'm slightly unclear, Councillor, with respect to the maintenance and the islands. We are unable to do works in terms of the islands because of the presence of European protected species, and we have no justification that would comply with that guidance. But in terms of maintenance in general for the scheme, yes, it does need to be given serious consideration.
For some years now, there has been quite a debate going on about the removal of such islands. I think most people realise that this is not going to happen. At present, we have plants that are growing in there which are alien species. And there is a concern that if we're not able to maintain those islands, just either by planting indigenous species or making it more presentable, how are you going to, in actual fact, assure people, as I've said, that you can maintain the new development as suggested? I mean, we are only talking about 3 islands at present that need to be looked at, need to get the works done on them to make them presentable, and yet we haven't been able to achieve that.
I mean, the issue with the islands is that in terms of flooding, and the report alludes to this, though it was a subject of the previous report, that the islands have no impact on flooding. The presence of the island have a 5 millimetre sort of level difference in the worst return periods. So maintenance of those islands is certainly not an issue associated with the council's duties under the Flood Risk Management Act, which would require works of clearance and repair to substantially reduce the risk of flooding. The maintenance of a flood protection scheme, I would argue, is different from maintenance of islands within the river, where, first of all, the islands within the river are difficult to access and there's no duty upon the council, whereas if we build a flood protection scheme, we have a duty to maintain that flood protection scheme. So, I don't know, that probably doesn't answer the question, but it's an attempt to try to.
Yeah, thanks. I've only got one question. On page 68, paragraph 3.9.6, where it asks us to approve the recommendation that's shown under 2.6. The recommendation is asking us to seek upfront costs for continued development and obtain an indicative commitment to fund the project in future from policy and resources. However, I'll put my Scotsman hat on here, it's not actually given us a cost of what we're actually asking policy and resources to fund. The report just says we're going to ask policy and resources to give us some money, but it's not giving us an indication of how much money we're actually going to ask policy and resources for.
I think what we're looking for in this regard is for the agreement from this committee that there's an acceptance that the project is worth progressing. In terms of the development costs, I suspect to a certain extent, I am unable to give you detailed estimates of the cost to take the project to development, but looking at a sort of 10% design costs on a scheme of this nature. You'd be looking at $1 million to take this scheme to the stages where it would be ready for promotion as a project, and at which point we would return to this committee for approval to promote the scheme.
Yeah, I understand that we don't have upfront, to the penny upfront costs, but we're going to be asking another committee for upfront costs, but we don't know how much upfront costs we're going to be asking them. I don't actually think we're at the stage where we can ask another committee for upfront costs when we don't have a reasonably good idea of what the upfront costs are. Councillor Martin.
Thanks, Chair. It's just getting back to the problem with Linden Grove. I noticed there the barriers are, if you're building a wall with temporary barriers, it can need to be, who will put these barriers in place, and if there has got to be a flooding, is that down to the residents, or is there another means of these barriers will be put in place?
I would say the level of detail in that regard would still to be confirmed. My view would be very much that the local authority would have the responsibility for erecting the temporary defences, whether that's closing of gates, putting in walling in replacement of the glass walling, as I'd mentioned during the presentation, or in this case putting defences around the properties. But on saying that, what I would also like to see is the opportunity, and this would again be in discussions with residents, that the storage of these is in a local location rather than being stored, say, at Wayside Depot or somewhere like that, if there was access issues, we couldn't get the barriers down there. So if we store them locally, there is a potential then that residents themselves could put them in if needs be, so that there's some resilience in that process. But it would still, I would see the responsibility lay with the local authority to install these defences.
Chair, if I could just come back on the kind of funding issue. What we're proposing to do is we're obviously seeking this committee's approval to the recommendation that we go to Policy and Resources and ask for this to be considered as a priority project within the Council's capital investment strategy. At the same time, we're preparing a bid document into the capital investment strategy, and we're looking at setting out the kind of timelines there and what we think the funding stream will be, and that detail will be what goes to Policy and Resources. Now, I understand timing will be that's probably November Policy and Resources Committee, where they will be looking at the following 3 years capital investment strategy. They'll be looking at bids for additional priority projects, and they'll be looking at the infrastructure asset class programmes. A number of assumptions will have to be made in that bid as to the additional or external support that might come forward through Scottish Government's funding, and we'll put in those assumptions there. But effectively, what James is saying is we'll be looking to bid for the funding to progress the design of the scheme, but I think we're also probably looking for commitment that this is treated as a priority project. We probably need to demonstrate to Scottish Government, if we're looking for funding from them, that the Council is prepared to go some way towards funding the scheme, and how we work that into the Council's capital investment strategy would be a matter for Policy and Resources.
Yeah, just confirm that if we removed from recommendation 2.6 from seek upfront costs, that would not alter the fact that we're going to ask Policy and Resources Committee to give us some money, but the detail of that will come up to Policy and Resources, so we don't actually need that part in this recommendation, because the full detail will come to Policy, or as full a detail as possible would come to Policy and Resources in any case.
Yeah, Chair, I would agree that if we're going to go to Policy and Resources with a bid through the Capital Investment Strategy group, then that will include the upfront costs. So, yeah, concur.
Are you happy enough? Was it on that point? Councillor Prentice, would you vote in again?
Thanks, Chair. Just wanted for a second to come back to 393 on page 68 on about the combined sewers at 0.7 million and 0.5 million. There's no, well, unless I've missed it totally, there's nothing in there about the cost of a pumping station. that I can see, or is it inclusive in these figures?
Yeah, the 0.5 and the 0.7 million are the costs associated with the pump station. So to avoid the sewer surcharging would be that, but it would also include some sewer. One of the elements is a sewer that passes under Buccleuch Street Bridge along the cycle path and then joins into the main sewer at the bottom of Bank Street, and that's obviously underneath the proposed embankment. And there's costs associated with the moving of that sewer as well, so that would be part of the scheme. But yeah, these costs include the pump station and pumps.
I'll move to recommendations. There'll be no other speakers. Members are asked to note the design proposals for the Whitesands project developed on the principles of the charrette outcomes detailed in the report at 3.5.1 as being both a holistic and sustainable approach, acknowledging while the principles of flood protection and public realm improvements will remain, certain design elements may be varied to obtain necessary permissions required to undertake the work. Councillor Nicholson.
Thank you, Chair. It's just on, I think we need to firm up that a report won't come back with any changes, to this committee for approval. That's made. The final report, if you want, or at least the changes, will come back to the committee for approval.
Are members willing to add that to the end of the recommendation? That if there are design changes, it will come back as a further report? Councillor Martin.
It's just on that. Will that include the car parking and a proper strategy for the...
Yeah, it's actually a different recommendation. We'll come to that one. Members are also asked to note the feedback from the public consultation held on 21st and 22nd August 2013 as detailed in the appendix. Councillor Nicholson.
Thank you. It comes back to my point about taking the public with us. So I think there has to be something in there about ongoing public consultation, and also that public consultation. Councillor Martin brought up the issue at Linden Grove, so that's got to include ongoing public consultation with that area as well.
Members quite happy to add to the end 2.2 and to continue further public consultation on any future proposals. I'm not hearing anybody that disagrees with me. 2.3, note the benefit cost analysis detailed in 3.9.4 in the report shows there is financial advantage in undertaking a scheme that offers a 1 in 25 year level of protection. Note the positive feedback for the Scottish Government for the progression of the scheme. Councillor Nicholson. Yeah, 2.5. Councillor Nicholson.
2.5. There's been a lot of discussion about car parking, and that is a big issue for the scheme as well. So I think within 2.5 or change 2.5 to agree to a future report on car parking that sets out clearly alternative car parking provision to replace the 250 spaces or 235, whatever it is, being removed, and in such a way that it actually supports the footfall for the traders in the area as well.
Have you got precise wording, Councillor Nicholson?
Yeah, agree to a future report on car parking that sets out clearly alternative car parking provision to replace the lost the number of the 250 spaces or 235, whatever it is, alternative car parking provision to replace the 250 spaces being removed in a way that supports the footfall of the businesses in the area.
Members happy to change that recommendation to Councillor Diggle?
I think we need clarification on the number of car parking spaces we're replacing.
Yeah, I think it's 235 or 250, I'm not sure. So it's my fault for not getting the figure.
Are members willing to say circa 235? I'm being told it's 230. You're happy with that, Councillor Nicholson? 2.6, approve a recommendation to the Policy and Resources Committee to identify the Whitesands project as a priority project as part of the ongoing development of the capital investment strategy. That's taken out from the CCUP to upfront costs. Members willing to agree that? And 2.7, agree that part of the Whitesands project, further investigation is to be carried out to determine the viability of making grants and or interest-free loans and professional advice available to property owners whose property lie behind the proposed defences but still within the 1 in 200 floodplain to improve flood resilience. Thank you. I'll move on to item 10. It's the performance report, planning and environmental services and DG First strategic commissions. I believe Mr. Herriot's speaking to this again. Is there anything to add to it?
The report sets out in the appendices the performance data that's already been before members at the area committee sessions in May and June of this year, and some of the feedback from those area committees.
Councillor Ogilvie.
Thanks. Summit now. I know it's early days. I don't sit on GG First, but I sit on Planning, House and Environment, and I sit at the area committee. And if you look at the Annandale and Eskdale feedback, if you want, it's probably the biggest there. We feel, from a scrutiny point of view, that, and it's not just DG First, we've raised this at an Eskdale area committee on most of the reports. They have to be a bit more area specific. There's no point in being generic, and we've raised this. The question we keep asking of the officers there is, does this really get taken up at the centre? Now, the whole point was area committees would feed into this, and we've got a report here. So my question is, Chair, will this feedback from the area committees be put into the future report so that we get these sort of, and it's all there, it's all evident, it's all written down what we'd like, because we're into second year now of area committee, the new framework. So hopefully the end of the year and going into next year, the level of detail that we're requiring the area committee will improve.
Mr. Derrick.
Yeah, if I could just kind of generally comment on that in terms of the reports, and I think this is the kind of the second year of the cycles of taking the strategic commissions, particularly for the P&E service and for DG First to the area committees. The table in the report sets out all the feedback for this year's report that we're looking at, 12-13. It also suggests to Planning, House and Environment Services Committee what the response should be to that, whether it notes certain items, whether it responds to certain items by developing the strategic commissions. My intention is to get the feedback from this committee and then in November bring back the strategic commissions for a refresh based on what's agreed here today, based on the feedback that's come from area committees. I think some of the comments, I mean, it's there for members to see, but there are particular comments about the data at area committees being area specific. And where we can, and within the commissions, we try to drill down on an area basis and give figures. But sometimes that's coming out, it's only a figure that we would record on a region-wide basis. But again, as we refresh the commissions, we will look at the indicators and the trend data and see where we can provide indicators on an area-specific basis.
Councillor Lever.
Thank you, Chair. Got a few questions. One is 117 of 270, 212, average number of times gullies emptied per annum. The average is 1, so does that mean some of them aren't emptied at all? Or do we have the assurance that all gullies are emptied at least once a year? The second is 125 about the third-party insurance claims settled and repudiated. Could we have some sort of breakdown on how many are repudiated and how many are settled? Because, like most councils, I get an awful lot of complaints about people claiming they've hit a pothole and produce evidence that the car has been damaged, but they don't get any satisfaction from the council's insurers. And the final one is 133 of 270, number of fixed penalty notice issued for dog fouling, littering and fly tipping. It's 79, seems to be incredibly low once again. One of the main complaints I get is about dog fouling. I would hope that given what's happening with the community safety wardens, that figure will be hugely increased over the next year or so. That's the only way in which you can actually persuade people not to allow their dogs to foul pavements, is by actually issuing fixed penalty notices.
If this committee, sorry, just to respond to some of those points Councillor Lever raised, I mean, if the committee wants to and is minded to do so, we could provide a bit more data on the insurance claims, the third-party insurance claims. We could identify those that were repudiated and those that were settled, and that data could certainly be added into the commissions without with relative ease, I would think. On the dog fouling issues, I've actually said in the main body of the report that there has been a new commission prepared that has now taken some of the issues out of the public realm commissions that we have, and the dog fouling, fly tipping is now dealt with in a separate commission that runs the community safety team, and I believe that commission has been developed by CCS, by Community and Customer Services. So that's less of an issue for, and will fall out of the commissions as we refresh them at the next committee cycle. Charles, I wonder if you could maybe say something on gully emptying.
Sorry, could you please repeat the question, gully emptying, please? Sorry.
Page 117, at 212, the average number of times gullies emptied per annum averages 1. So what I'm saying is every gully emptied at least once, or are some not touched at all? I mean, I can take you around my ward and show you gullies that look like miniature gardens rather than gullies.
Sorry for missing the question in the first instance. We've done quite a bit of work on gully emptying. Some of the members that attended our recent depot visits may have seen the new items of plant that have been purchased and the slab in the cab type of arrangement. I wouldn't say that we're able to get around all our gullies twice a year, or some of them maybe not even once a year, but what we will be able to do as we progress our gully emptying with this new item of plant, we'll be able to figure out just exactly what we've got, where it is, what condition it's in, and reprogram our cycle of gully cleaning to target those gullies which are most in need of cleaning. Some of the gullies that we go and clean at the moment, a large percentage of them don't need cleaned at all, while some of them may need cleaned twice a year. And that's what we hope to get out of that project, and that's what's going on at the moment in conjunction with the Commissioner.
Members have no other questions. I would. Councillor Peacock.
Thank you, Chair. A couple of quick points on page 115, reference to roads maintenance. It's a point I brought up at Area Committee at the time, and regards the length of the carriageways that are resurfaced, which is 1.9% of our network on the A-class roads, certainly, compared to the surface dressed, which is 5% of the A-class roads. Now, again, I've got my doubts as to whether the surface dressing is a cost-effective way of doing it. And on particular roads, the lower class roads, I can understand that. But on the major, the A-class roads, I still have my doubts. I was answered at Area Committee, but I wasn't particularly satisfied or convinced with the answer that surface dressing is a good value for money option compared to resurfacing. I appreciate the difference in cost, and you would have to resurface a lot less because of the cost of it. But I think that's the way that we should be looking, is to fully resurface where necessary rather than surface dressing, especially on the A-class roads. But the questions that I'd like to ask, just a bit of clarification. When we go on to page 131 and then 133, reference the burial grounds and the street cleansing, in points 1.3, the number of confirmed service failures concerning burial grounds maintenance, and the same with the street cleaning. I'm just like an idea of what some of these service failures would likely to be, considering that Annandale and Eskdale top the list in both those particular areas.
Can I maybe just come back on the first point just now then? The length of carriageway surfaced and resurfaced, and the length of the carriageway that's surface dressed. Historically, we have always resurfaced about 1% of the carriageway, between 1 and 2% of the carriageway network, the 4,200 odd kilometres we've got, and we're able to do more surface dressing, and that usually has been up to, usually historically, between 2 and 4% in any 1 year of the network that is able to be surface dressed. And as you point out, Councillor, that it's a much cheaper process in terms of the surface dressing, and it's a factor of, I would imagine, a quarter or fifth, maybe a fifth of a difference in the cost, a 1-to-5 ratio. So we can achieve a lot more in the surface dressing. It's part of a package of interventions that the DG First will use for maintenance, and they will come to a decision whether a road now needs some extra structural integrity or needs to be rehabilitated in some way, and we need to put strength back into, or whether a road needs to be primarily what we need to do is seal the road with the surface dressing process, with the bitumen applied and the aggregate put down on top of it, which in itself does not add strength, but what we'll do is actually close up the cracks in the road, that where we get water in and where we get freeze-thaw action and acceleration of failures. It's also a process that's used that there can be some surfacing works will be undertaken where it's appropriate a number of years later, and again maybe Charles can speak a bit more about this, where it's appropriate to come back once the surfacing has bedded in and we have the structural integrity, is actually to seal the road, and then we know we've got a good 10, 12 years out of the whole kind of process, which has been the surfacing and the surface dressing application.
Yeah, I should probably add that surface dressing and surfacing go hand in hand. Quite often, we're actually preparing a report for our own committee in October about surface treatments and the actual selection of materials that we'd use to surface. Quite often, we may use what would probably be a cheaper material on some of our A-class roads, which would be a dense bitumen macadam, which wouldn't have a chip applied. It sometimes doesn't quite give the full skid resistance, and it would normally have to be surface dressed the following year to provide that skid resistance. So that may be why you see some of our principal routes actually being surface dressed. They're actually new beds from 2-3 years ago. So it goes hand in hand. The most appropriate treatment is actually hot rolled asphalt with a chip applied. You get instantaneous skid resistance after a couple of weeks. That's obviously a more expensive material, but certainly the surface dressing process isn't haphazard in any way. It's a scientific process, and there's a fairly lengthy design code that has to be followed in the selection of sites and also in the application of the material. Happy to give you more information on that if you require it. Thanks.
If I could just come in generally before Fraser comes back, on the service failures and the complaints upheld, I think within the main body of the report, we've identified that was an issue that was raised. It came up particularly, I think, in the, if I recall right, the Stewart Area Committee. We're very keen to see what some of these complaints were. And I'm suggesting in terms of our recommendations here in response to that future area committee reports on performance will set out what some of the, without putting specific details in, but we'll set out the nature of the complaints or the service failures. Members were quite keen at some of the area committees to be able to review that data. I don't know if there's anything you want to add.
Quickly to come back as to, can we explain as to why Annandale and Eskdale was the highest in both these regions?
I don't think I can explain that. I mean, I think we have to get it into context as well. I mean, the service failures for the street cleansing, I think Annandale and Eskdale are looking at 5, we empty somewhere in the region of 1,600 bins, litter bins, every week. So it's a very small percentage. But I mean, we can drill down into the detail of that and look further, yes.
Councillor Tuckfield.
Thank you, Chair. My question's not on roads or anything like that. It's the waste collection. Is there sufficient flexibility and funding within the new zero waste policy to allow more tolerable methods of doorstep collection? Many seaside villages have little or no rear access, and houses in the main are terraced with narrow pavements on the front. The sight of multiple bins will do nothing to enhance tourism in rural seaside villages. Can you advise me if any research has been done into alternative methods in these villages? And can you also confirm to me that any new builds will have a discrete covered area included at the planning application stage, if that's within your remit? Thank you.
Chair, I'll attempt to answer these questions. We'll take the planning one first. certainly as we develop local development plan and supplementary planning guidance, we will look at that. In fact, we already have supplementary planning guidance that would indicate storage areas for bins in the event of us introducing the new system. As far as seaside towns are concerned, and all the other areas that are involved in the implementation of this project, we are looking at being as flexible as possible with the rollout, and we will look at specific areas, and if there are specific problems, we'll deal with these appropriately. We are starting our public engagement on the rollout of this project tomorrow evening, Wednesday in Stranraer, in the library, and on Thursday evening in Whitesands. And we will be looking to hear what the public have got to say about the new project, and as well as our own design to these issues. We'll be taking on board what the public say and hopefully roll that up to what will be the optimum solution.
Thank you. That's very.
Councillor Geddes.
Chairman, I have very real concerns about this report. I would go back. If you look at the recommendation, the purpose of the report, first of all, paragraph 1, provides a 12-month overview of the planning housing for this committee on the delivery of the 2012-13 strategic commissions between Planning and Environment Services and DG First. And the first recommendation is to review the performance of the Planning and Environment Services and DG First strategic commissions for the 12-month period ending the 31st of March, as detailed in the Appendix Strategic Commissions Summary Performance Framework for 2012-13. Now, I can speak for our own area committee when this came, and at the end of the day, we were at this for about almost 2 hours, and I would have to be honest and say that it worked well, and we really raised a whole raft of issues, put the questions to the council officials who were there. By and large, were satisfied, not always, with the responses that we got, and the upshot is that these are detailed in the body of the report. Now, the other 3 area committees did exactly the same, and I would commend them. I'm sure they did just as good a job as we did in the Wickton Area Committee, and I would commend them for that, because scrutiny and performance management should be at the very core of this authority. But what I would have to say today, sir, if I'm understanding this correctly, is in fact that this committee, this client side, for want of a better term, and that's no a word which finds much favour, a phraseology which finds much favour now, has been asked to do the same exercise from our perspective, from this committee's perspective. I'm correct in saying that?
From the wording, you would appear to be correct. However, I know where you're
exactly, which leads me to the point, sir. It's 1:45. We've got an agenda of 18 items. We've got a subcommittee coming in at 2 o'clock, housing subcommittee, which protocol dictates if we're not finished at 2 o'clock, that committee will take over. And yet we're expected, as it were, to go through this, and the other items remaining in this agenda and do them justice within the amount of time remaining. My response, Chairman, is get real. And if we're serious at the end of the day about dealing with scrutiny and performance management in a detailed fashion that we should be doing at this committee, as well as at the corporate committees and as well as at area committees, it's about time we got a grip and structured our meetings properly to ensure, in fact, we can achieve that objective. But there's a whole raft of issues there that I would like to raise. And what's even more ironic is that, as far as I'm concerned, Councillor Peacock raised a perfectly valid question, and the response we got was that he didn't have sufficient information, there wasn't sufficient information here today to answer that. As far as I'm concerned, that's no good enough. And as I say, it's about time that we had a radical reappraisal just exactly of how we present this type of report to committees such as this. Otherwise, we're only paying lip service to it and wasting time. Or was it, perhaps the inference to be drawn is that, well, we really don't do scrutiny. It's something else that we should be referring to the scrutiny committee. I think you'll get my drift, Chairman.
Yeah, I get your drift completely. However, I will not be referring it to the scrutiny committee. I can guarantee you that. The members have had their opportunity at area committees to voice their opinions on their own parts of the reports where area committees were, the performance was broken down to area committees My intention was that we would review the overall at the minute, not repeating what had already been done at area committee. I don't see the need for it to be done twice. However, I do have some sympathy with your I wasn't prepared to see that on tape. Have we any other questions? Councillor Ogilvie.
Sorry, Chair. We were quite critical of the report that came to Annandale and Estill because it didn't have the local information. What we've put in, what's been recorded in here is the whole thing, and correct me if I'm wrong, because this is a governance issue, is area committees do the scrutiny and any recommendations to the service committee are supposed to be adopted. The question I asked you at the very start was, are you going to adopt this? But it's not just DG First, we've done it with education, social work and whoever. It's very generic, and there's no point in area committees having generic information. We want local information. There's no point in saying there's academies are doing well. There's 3 academies in Annandale and Estill. We want to know which ones are doing well, which ones, so we can focus on that. That's the whole point of this. And it stopped working. And I'm not having we need to, I agree with Alistair, we need to get this bottomed out because we're having area committees with all these people and we don't achieve anything. Now, there's a whole list of stuff there from all the area committees. The simple question is, will it be adopted by this committee, which is the service committee, to feed back to the whatever department that future reports at area committees will be more area specific?
Just to clarify the statement, you are wishing that the responses for this committee are adopted by the committee for the views that were expressed by area committees. Is that what you're asking me, if this is what we're going to be doing today?
Well, forgive me, I always thought that was the mechanism. I mean, we've got members nodding, so somewhere it's gone wrong. The whole point of the area management framework was for us to look at and scrutinise performances of the various departments. Any recommendations would come back to whatever service committee, and they then would decide, yeah, we can tweak that or do that. Here we are, we've got a raft of stuff from all the area committees, and all I'm asking is, will some of that be taken on board so when the next round of service committee reports come to the committee, they're more relevant to us?
I can confirm that my point of view would be as Vice Chair of this committee, would be, slip of the tongue, would be that the recommendations that the area committees have made, and if we are happy with the responses as the service committee, that yes, those will be incorporated. And I take the point that I think it was yourself that made regarding the insurance claims that had been Councillor Lever made about the ones that had been repudiated and the ones that had been settled. Yes, I would like that breakdown as well. So if we can put that into the figures for the next report. But yes, my answer would be the responses that we make, that the area committees have made, will be incorporated in the next report that goes to area committees. That's what we're here to agree today. That's my line. Mr. Speedy, you wish to make a comment?
Yeah, just to clarify the contents of the paper, Chair, and I've listened to what members have said, and I do have some concern with what they've said, and I'll certainly take these issues on board, particularly about the structure of the meeting. This is an important aspect of our commission and delivery partnership, and members have to be able to scrutinise the services appropriately. The paper sets out the decisions at each of the area committees, and then it sets out the proposed response of this committee. And it's these proposed responses, if members agree, that will be addressed through the commissions in the future. If members have any issues on any of these proposed responses, then it's for them to raise it today. I hope that clarifies contents of the paper. Thank you.
If there's no other questions or clarifications required for the responses, I'll move to recommendations. Recommendation 2.1. Members are asked to review the performance of the Planning and Environmental Services and DG First Strategic Commissions for 12 months period ending 31st of March, as detailed in Appendix Strategic Commission Summary Performance Framework 2012-13. Councillor Guinness.
I would put it to you, Chairman, why haven't you done that?
Yeah, the clarification, yes, I know what the recommendation says. If members are quite happy to take that out, the purpose of this meeting was to review the comments that were made by area committees, to agree that those recommendations would be incorporated into the next reports to the area committees under these commissions. Nobody wishes to make any more comment on that one, do they?
Are you moving a motion, Chairman?
Yeah, I'd be quite happy to move the motion that the word in the 2.1 is incorrect. No, we're not reviewing the performance of planning and environmental services in the commissions. We are reviewing the comments that are made from the area committees who did the scrutiny of their individual figures for their areas. And we are going to agree the comments that this committee is making on the recommendations from the area committee.
I would certainly support you, Chairman, in your comments in relation to 2.1. I don't think that's at all accurate, and it's not helpful. I would doubt, quite frankly, if we've given adequate scrutiny to 2.2, but time is marching on. It's now nearly 1 o'clock. As I say, and I'll leave it at that. But I would hope that, as Mr. Speedy has said, that further consideration will be given to the structure of this, and if need be, a further report or reports back.
Yes, I'm being told Mr. Speedy's taking that on board. You put me in a position that I've made a proposal that 2.1 is no longer valid.
And I've indicated that I would second you if you're making a formal motion.
Thank you. Members, any members got any disagreement with that? We'll remove 2.1. So the new 2.1 would be members are asked to agree the responses of this committee to the aspects of the performance within the strategic commissions referred to the Planning and Housing and Environment Services Committee by the area committees during their February and June 2013 meeting as set out in Table 1, with the addition of, we want the numbers of repudiated and settled insurance claims separated in the next report that goes to the area committees. Is anybody going to agree them? I think if members had actually read their papers, they would be willing to say whether they agreed with them or not. Leader?
Chair, I'm happy with the second one, but we've been asked to do a job and you tell me that we're not going to do the first one. We've just decided today, well, we're not going to do 2.1 to review it.
I proposed that we move the recommendation 2.1 and it was seconded and nobody made any comment regarding they didn't want it, that they wanted to review the performance. Councillor Geddes?
Well, my understanding, sir, was in fact that you removed 2.1 and I agreed with you on the basis that 2.1 you indicated was in fact wholly inaccurate. That was not in fact what, and I see the governance officer, nodding an assent, that was not in fact what this committee were being asked to do.
That's my understanding of what I said, just governance.
Well, what you're saying, Chairman, is that you're reviewing the comments of area committees as contained in the report, and these comments are taken on board as part of the further reports on the commissions to area committees.
Leader, you want it to come back?
Just wondering what timescale we were going to do to actually put in. Was it to the next meeting that we're going to review the performance that we did? Or we're just not bothering reviewing the performance that we did? I just didn't pick that up in your original motion.
Chair, I wonder if I could help the situation. 2.2, we need to agree the responses of this committee to the area committee decisions that were made so we can further develop the commissions going forward. And may I suggest that we come back to November with a further report refreshing the commissions to include that update.
Members happy to review the performance at the November? Councillor Geddes.
I would certainly agree with that, sir, because I think that, as I say, it's imperative that we do, as a service committee, do exactly that, and that we do it in a proper and a rigorous fashion. And manifestly, we're not in a position to do that today, in my view.
Leader?
Could we make sure that there's sufficient time allowed for that on the agenda, and that we don't have meetings in the afternoon that might end up with the same issue today as we had?
Yes, I would agree with that one, that we lay aside, say, sufficient time. However, as members are aware, we would need to move a housing sub, because there's a housing sub planned after the next November meeting. Councillor Geddes.
Well, as my colleague on my left here is saying, perfectly reasonably, why not have a special meeting sometime in October to do this?
I'm perfectly happy for an extra meeting just to review this one, to be arranged in October. However, there are dates in October that I won't be available, so whenever it's ready, I'm perfectly happy for an extra meeting just for this one, to review this. So you're obviously more aware of what's going to happen in the future than I am. I'm perfectly happy for an extra meeting in October for this one item, for the review of the performance in the commissions. Councillor Geddes.
I regard that, sir, as being very helpful indeed, and it would give this particular issue, the status and the importance that it warrants. Thank you.
Councillor Ogilvie.
I'm really pleased, because we really wouldn't do this justice today. Several questions have been asked, and I don't know the detail of that. There's no point in putting stuff in there if nobody can speak to it. So we've got a chance now for officers to look at that, and you had a couple of questions that we couldn't answer, so hopefully the officers will have the information with them for the special meeting.
Yeah, I have somewhat sympathy when, not just this committee, when other committees are given the scrutiny of the past performance and the amount of other agenda items. It may be something that, if we are looking at scrutiny of performance, that we may need to just set aside meetings just for them themselves, because to put it into an 18-item agenda does not do it the proper justice. The time's now 1 o'clock. I'll be generous. I'll give members the opportunity. Do they wish to carry on at the minute, or do they wish to have their meal at the minute and come back at 1:30, considering we will have to break at 2 o'clock again for the housing to come in? I'll give members the opportunity to give their comments.
I think a break for lunch, as there's members of the housing subcommittee on the planning, housing environment. So they'll either put right through and have no lunch or whatever.
There would be a need for at least a 5-minute comfort break anyway on the Vice Chair's behalf, but we'll reconvene at 1:30. So promptly, we'll now turn to item 11, Flood Risk Management Scotland Act implementation update. Mr MacLeod, I believe you're speaking to this report. Have you anything to add?
I've nothing to add. Brian will speak to the report as well, and I will say that he's nothing to add at this stage.
Any questions from members? Councillor Ogilvie.
It's just, when you look at the recommendations, I quite agree that local scrutiny or involvement at area committees is a step forward. I don't know if all area committees have the community part. I know Annandale and Eskdale do. We in Annandale and Eskdale have set six agenda items. So obviously this will have to be reviewed with area management teams about when we fit in the this particular agenda item in one of our community meetings. But I like the general thrust of this report.
Yeah, thanks. I believe in Wigton in the Wigton area we have the same. We've set an agenda for our community meetings. Any members, any other questions? Sorry, Leader.
Is there any issues, Brian, with regard to the fact that there's some of the councils who are in the area not really wanting to sign up at this time, and will that be something that we have to consider in the future?
No, there's no issues at the moment. As far as I know, everybody will sign up to this. Yeah.
If there's no other questions, we'll move to recommendations. 2.1 members are asked to agree that the method of elected member involvement with the process should be changed from that agreed at this committee on the 6th of November 2012 to the approach of using area committee's community to consult with all elected members, but with the final decision of proposed flood risk management actions being taken by this committee. And agree that in using the area committee community meetings, the public have the opportunity to input to the proposals for flood risk management actions. Agree to the memorandum of understanding with local partnership partners, Scottish Borders Council, Scottish Water and SEPA. And note the key dates required for approval of the appraisal process. Thank you. I now turn to item 12. Just make a comment beforehand. Officers have been reminded of the member officer protocol, where ward members have their place on issues such as this, where proposed changes are being proposed. It's with Mr MacLeod speaking to this report again. Have you anything to add to the report, Mr MacLeod?
Nothing to add to the report.
I'll open it. Councillor Martin.
No, it's just on the Brooms Road one. I see the company's maintained. We've been maintained by the company to the 6th of March 2015, and then it's maintained. It'll be maintained by DG first after the 6th of March 2015 until the cost maintenance is prohibitive. Could that mean the likes of the 7th of March? You might just say it's got to close. Or could we, and as I say, well, if it is going to be closed, will it be coming to the area committee or that with other local members, as Jim said, with telling us about the closure?
In terms of the intention of the report, no, it's the intention of the report is not to close it on the 7th of March. If the facility which the council has purchased, unlike the East Riggs facility, we should be able to maintain it at a lower cost. My concern and the concerns raised by, not surprisingly, JC Deco are that we don't have the ability to maintain the facility because it's very complex and we don't have the parts or access to the parts and such like. But in terms of its future closure, that's the if the recommendation of this committee is to seek area committee input, then that's recommendation.
Councillor Lever. Just
further information from James. I did my sums on this, and according to my calculations, the Brums Road car park at 30 pence per use works out at something like 5 uses a day. The green at East Riggs, that works out at 3 per day, and the Port Roadie one is 15 per day. Is that the right sort of region?
I was getting certainly for the Brooms Road one, 4 to 5 per day, East Riggs 3 per day. I was 11 per day for the Port Roadie one, but I can quickly check my maths. But you can from that work out the costs per visit.
Do you want to follow up, Councillor Lever?
And come back on that. I mean, obviously, per user, it's a huge amount of money we're spending here. It's more than a penny, as it were. But I know in the past when we've looked at closing public conveniences, we've actually gone out to local businesses to see if they would be interested in entering a contract with the council whereby they provide their facilities to members of the public and we as a council recompense them. Now, I think part of the problem why there was so little interest amongst local businesses because of the deal we're offering them was so low compared to the amount of work it might possibly generate. But obviously, in this case, it wouldn't be a huge amount of work. But I think we really need to go back and revisit that option because in rural areas, it could make the difference, providing we as a council looked at what we're paying at the moment compared to what we can offer a business, between a business actually succeeding or failing, given the seasonal nature of some of that. So I think that is something which we need to do possibly before the next round of savings we're looking at in terms of the council.
Yeah, certainly the option of a scheme similar to the one that Perth operate, theirs is referred to as a comfort scheme. I've had some discussions with officers at Perth, and they're indicating that payments would be, I think the range they gave was between £800 and £2,000 per year for the provision of for toilet facilities for public. Depending, if it's a small cafe or a large public, a larger sort of venue where opening hours and facilities are available.
Yeah, thanks for that. Like Councillor Lever, I did my maths as well, and the figures and visits a day are about right. It's just over 3 a day for East Riggs, under 5 for Dumfries, and just under 11 for Stranraer. And I actually weighed the one further and worked out how much it cost per visit in there, but I'll not bore you with them. Councillor Nicholson.
Question's been answered.
Councillor Peacock.
Thank you, Chair. Just a point reference, the one at the Green at East Riggs, I've been asked to raise with you. Obviously, the figures don't stack up, and we accept that. But a point I was asked to raise was, and it takes us back to the previous report through the DG First and the secondary performance figures, and also reflects on what you mentioned at the start of this meeting with at the start of this item with the officer member protocol. And under DG First's own comments under the key actions it has there to work with local communities and other providers to identify opportunities to procure alternate provision. And it's just to say that as long as local members, and although it's not my ward, I've been asked to bring it up, that local members in that are consulted on this.
Yeah, like I said, they have been reminded that they've got to consult with the local members regarding any changes within their ward. And I would agree with the previous speaker regarding we need to look at the comfort scheme for alternative arrangements in places like that. Councillor Geddes.
Thanks, Chairman. Unlike Councillor Lever and you, I didn't do the maths. I'm not clever enough to do the maths. I simply went to page 135 of item 10, which spells out in all details cost of provision per user in automated public conveniences. Annandale and Essendale 1685, Nissdale 990 and Whitesands 327 per user. And as far as I'm concerned, sir, that simply isn't sustainable. These conveniences have got to be closed as soon as practicable to do so. That's my view. Sorry, no, I didn't quite finish, but...
sorry, yeah, go ahead.
No, okay. What I would say, though, again, is that we must sell, a comfort scheme. And what I would say, in a Wiganshire context, in the last occasion, was that I personally didn't feel it was particularly well sold. I still think at the end of the day, Chairman, that there is a possibility of getting, a scheme put in place by appropriate approaches to appropriate people and selling it in a proper fashion. And I would hope that will be pursued as well.
Councillor Ogilvie?
Yeah, just to follow on from what Craig said, this isn't my ward, and the first I knew about it was when I read it in the report. I understand the figures, and the Community Council have agreed as well. They think it's not cost effective anymore. In the report it says the nearest facilities is the Devil's Porridge, which is slightly out of the village. The new facility, when it comes online, is in the village, so that might be an alternative then. What the question was, have we looked at any other alternatives rather than signposting folk to the Devil's Porridge?
I mean, at East
East Riggs, I'd not looked at any other alternative facilities. I'm not sure, confess, there isn't a doctor's surgery, but there is a chemist facility in the village. But beyond that, I'm not sure what other facilities are available that we could look to a comfort scheme option. There's no council facilities, unlike, not even, we're obviously signposting to other public toilets with the Dumfries and Stranraer option, but also to other council buildings as an alternative. And there wasn't anything in East Riggs to that. It was the attraction in East Riggs for visitors who might be making use of this facility are likely to be going to the Devil's Porridge as an option. That obviously doesn't deal with people who live there, but that's a slightly different situation. So I hadn't looked at alternative facilities, but if a comfort scheme is something that is considered appropriate, then that would obviously be an option.
Councillor Martin.
Thanks, Chair. Just under 3.9, if the Brims Road car park one closes, it's given there'll be temporary signing put up to be provided to point people to the nearest toilets. Why is it just got to be temporary? Surely it'd be just cost effective to leave them up.
I guess it's the in terms of temporary, it sort of like how long do you leave a sign up that says new road layout ahead? How long do we sign from a place where there isn't a public convenience? People are eventually going to know there isn't one there. So it'd be for that that period of time. But yes, leaving it up is not going to be an issue.
No, I was just thinking if it's just a sign with toilets on it, why would you put it up and take it down again?
Leader.
Chair, I think the points Councillor Geddes made, I don't think they are sustainable here, that we can actually afford these facilities. And as Councillor Martin said, I think we should be going at the end of this committee as quickly as we can to area committees to let them know that these facilities should be removed from our portfolio.
Just for clarification, regarding the Broom Road one, are we talking about once the contract ends we close it, or do we ask DG first to maintain it until it becomes no longer viable to maintain? Councillor Geddes?
I wouldn't ask DG first to maintain it until it becomes no longer viable. I think as Councillor Martin said, I took the point, sort of closing it, the 6th and, or sort of terminating the 6th and closing on the 7th. I mean, at the end of the day, my view is it's quite clear because it will cost us a lot of money as well to continue to try to upkeep and maintain
it. Leader then, Councillor Martin.
Yeah, that was my point. As soon as the contract finishes, I think we should be looking to remove these facilities.
Councillor Martin?
No, it's just that I didn't actually say they'd be closing the 7th. Actually, it's just a supposition that they could actually close it. As I say, while they're workable, quite understand it shouldn't. They shouldn't close them as long as it's they're workable, they're maintainable. But as soon as they finish it, then but I say, certainly like to see ward members informed when it was actually going to close.
Councillor Geddes.
My apologies to John. I didn't deliberately misrepresent him. Forgive me for that.
Roger, if there's no more questions, we'll go to recommendations. However, Councillor Mayor.
Thanks, Chair. Well, I agree with everybody, they should be closed. I presume we're also going to put a notice up for a little while before they're closed, advising people they will be closing. Because thinking somewhere like East Riggs, when we only get used 3 times a day, but the chances are it's people that pass through East Riggs and know they're there. So if I think a couple of weeks before, if we could put a little notice up advising people the facilities will be closing, it might be of help.
Yeah, that seems a very sensible idea. Yep.
Councillor Wood.
Just on the health and safety issue, and that is that 2 of them have had Legionella testing done, and one that appears not to have it over in Stranraer. Will there be testing, or has there been testing of Legionella within those premises if there's going to be delay in closing?
I'm advised by DG First that the facility at
Port Roddy, which doesn't have Legionella testing. There's mains fed supply. There's no header tank within the facility, so the concerns over Legionella is less of an issue.
Thank you. If there's no more questions, we actually have a proposal that a motion and a second are saying that at the end of the contract, Brooms Road should be closed, which is not what members are asked to agree in the recommendations. Councillor Martin?
Well, I would go with the recommendations, but with just the proviso that the members are informed. 2-2.
Do you have a seconder to go with the proposal rather than just the closure of Brooms Road? In that case, 2-1 will need to be, 2-2 will need to be changed to go to recommendations. Members do wish to note the arrangements between Dumfries and Galloway Council and JC UK Limited for public toilet provisions at Brooms Road. Car Park Dumfries is detailed in 3.5 in the report. The Green East Rigs is detailed in 3.10 in the report. And the similar arrangement between Dumfries and Galloway and Healthmatic Limited, Sigma Finance and KBC Lease UK Limited for public toilet provision at Port Road, Stranraer is detailed in 3.14 of the report. The item 2.2 will need to be 2.3 note the contract for the Brooms Road Dumfries facility has been terminated to avoid an automatic 5-year extension resulting in the facilities maintenance contract ending in March 2015, after which the unit will be the responsibility of the council. 2.3 we're actually agreeing that following the ending of the contract in 2015, Brooms Road will be closed. Obviously with the proviso that local members are kept well informed that that is the decision of this committee. Closed and removed. Councillor Geddes.
Going back to Councillor Martin's earlier comments, I think Brooms Road car park is a big car park. It's not unreasonable to for the council surely to erect permanent signage in a car park of that type, pointing out where the nearest toilet toilet provision is, and I think that should be dealt with at that time as well, not on a temporary basis, but on a permanent basis, that it's there, so that people turn up, don't know the town, park there. And at the end of the day, they want to use the toilet, and they can see the sign directing them to the alternatives.
Members in the position to agree that it will be permanent signing. At 2.4, agree that following the termination of the contract with JC Deco Limited for the Green East Rigs APC before 8th of February 2014, avoiding the automatic 1-year extension, the facility will subsequently be removed in November 2014 and that no replacement facility will be provided, again with the addition that local members are kept well informed. And 2.5, agree that following the termination of the maintenance contract with Healthmatic Limited and the associated lease agreement with Sigma Finance and KBC Lease UK Limited for the Port Road APC, the facility will be subsequently removed with no replacement facility provided, again on the proviso that ward members are kept fully informed. I would say not just Ward 1, Ward 2, I would say Ward 1 as well, because although the toilet is in Ward 2, there's plenty of Ward 1 public would actually know that the toilet's there. We'll turn to item 13, Climate Ready Scotland, Climate Change Adaptation Programme consultation. believe Mr. Woodgie's speaking to this. Is there anything further to add to the report?
No, thanks.
Just before I open it to questions. Yeah, Mr. Speedy.
Chair, just to ask members to note that in the response, page 184, under 3B, there is a sentence that says, whilst energy is a devolved issue, it should read, whilst energy is not a devolved issue. So apologies for that omission.
Thank you. Members, any questions? Move to recommendations. Are members in a position to note the context of Climate Ready Scotland, Scottish Climate Change Adaptation Programme report? And 2.2, there's a misprint in the papers. We've got two 2.1s. At 2.2, agree our council's response with the alteration outlined by Mr. Speedy. Times 5 to 2. I'm unable to start the Housing Subcommittee until 2 o'clock. However, I wouldn't wish to stop a item halfway through just to start. I'll adjourn it with members' agreement until 2 o'clock so that we can get the Housing Subcommittee decide whether it's going to go ahead or whether we will postpone to the end of PHES with members' agreement. The PHES that aren't on the Housing Sub. Just a reminder that the proceedings are being recorded and they will be available to the public for viewing. I now move to item 14, the Economic Development, Dumfries and Galloway Core Paths Implementation Plan 13-16. I believe Mr. Fieldhouse, you're speaking to this report.
Aye, thank you, Chair. The report obviously stands. There's just one bit of clarification I'd like to bring to members' attention, which is in regard to the reason why the Appendix 1 has been broken down into community council areas. Primarily, this is twofold. The information that we captured as part of the community consultation process was focused on community councils, but more importantly, through the work we've done, through the tendering process in the past, through engaging local contractors, we've found that some of the contractors in the area are unable to bid in for larger contracts which either cover parts of the region or the area-based approach across the region. Therefore, the community councils was felt to be a more appropriate size and scale to attract further interest from some of our local contractors to undertake the work. I'm happy to take questions, Chair.
Thank you. Members, any questions? Councillor Ogilvie.
Just being parochial for a moment. Annan Causeway, tell me what that is.
I'm terribly sorry, Councillor. I don't have the detail available to identify exactly which path that is. Obviously, we can I can find that information out and pass that to you separately if that's suitable. Aye. It could be the naming. Obviously, there were an awful lot of namings that certain paths are recognised by different individuals under different names, and obviously we've tried to clarify that within the plan.
Councillor Lever.
Thank you, Chair. It's just an observation on page 195 in the first table. Mentions made of the Burns Walk, and the Community Council has cited as being including. Should that be including or Lawburn? Because I don't think it'll include as an active Community Council, and that part of the walk is actually on the Lawburn Community Council side. And can I just say that there is a problem with sewage actually leaking over onto that walkway. I don't know whether that will be tackled as part of the improvement plan in conjunction with Scottish Water.
Obviously, we'll take on board the points that are made, and when we come to upgrading that path, we will have the relevant discussions with SEPA.
Councillor Dempster.
Thanks, Chair.
being parochial again, Nithsdale seems to be conspicuous by its absence, and I hope that's no because community councils haven't bothered to engage with staff. I mean, I've met with Simon and David, and I'm happy with where we're going in discussions, but if you look at the contingency, that Nithsdale's the only, it's on page 196, the only ward or only district that's not mentioned at all. And I would have thought there'd always been an attempt to share the resource, unless there's been a huge failing in the past to maintain paths in the other regions of the council. But just an observation, I don't need a response, but I'd have thought, and I'm sure next year it'll be reflected quite differently in the report, I'm sure.
Do you wish to respond, Mr. Fairhouse? Councillor Carson.
Thank you, Chair. I'm sure this was brought up at a previous PHES meeting by another councillor regarding the maintenance. I realise that in 3.6 there's a core path maintenance plan to be completed during 2014-15, but what would be of use is some indication of what the cost of maintaining the current core paths is, and an indication of what the estimated cost is going forward with these new paths that are planned.
Thank you, Chair. With regard to the existing maintenance, we've identified 163 paths that we're actually maintaining across the region, which in essence comes to just over 220 kilometres of path that we're maintaining through two different mechanisms at this moment in time. We have our countryside access rangers who undertake maintenance of around about 165 kilometres across the region, and their maintenance costs work out at 26 pence per metre. We're also using the criminal justice teams through community payback to undertake 67 kilometres of maintenance across the region. At present, their maintenance costs are working out around about 14 pence per metre, but we have been told that they are currently at capacity with other work they're doing across the region. Obviously, that taken on board at this moment in time works out that we are maintaining around about 12% of the existing of the proposed network, primarily based on obviously historical use patterns, those paths which have high visitor numbers, and those paths that are in close proximity to settlements. We've also got that roughly around about 40% of the core path network will require little or no maintenance due to the path type and its location. So we have, in essence, around about 48% of the network that is currently being not maintained in any capacity at this moment in time. I'm afraid I don't have the figures in terms of what that would equate to, but based on the asset management plan that came to committee previously, we'd estimate that the requirement would be an annual revenue budget of around about £300,000 per year to maintain the network completely.
Councillor Geddes.
It's absolutely imperative, Chairman, that we do, in fact, upkeep and maintain these. You know, as far as I'm concerned, you know, to me, we should be trying to replicate, you know, a network which is basically similar to what they have by and large in rural England, where you've got quality, I mean superb quality footpaths, etc. You know, properly signposted, and most importantly of all, Chairman, adequately upkept and maintained. I walked them in Gloucestershire, Herefordshire, and rural Northumbria, and I mean they really they're a tremendous boon. I mean, not only from the point of view of sort of health and well-being, but you know, from the point of view of, you know, sort of tourist economy, and that to me is we should be looking to emulate that, and it doesn't come, of course, free of charge, as I say, and I think it's imperative that we afford at the appropriate time the relevant priorities to upkeep and maintain these. Otherwise, it's just going to be a total waste, ultimately, of public resources.
Councillor Prentice.
Thanks, Chair. Just to agree entirely with what Councillor Geddes has just said, but that's the thing I was going to bring up. It's on page 196, the one about Mochram Fell at 13,700 metres. It's a fair old length of a pathway. I noticed quite recently there was a guy got lost in the Blue Mountains outside Sydney and wasn't discovered for about 2 months. if anybody knows Morecambe Fell, I hope you get these signposts and finger posts up fairly pronto, because if you go up Morecambe Fell, you'll see a lovely expanse of trees. And I just hope the same doesn't befall somebody who walks up there. So please, try and get these signs up as quick as you can.
Mr. Fielders?
Aye, thank you, Chair. Noted, obviously, it is a 3-year improvement plan. However, we obviously have that in as a contingency project, and should obviously other projects fail to materialise during 2013-14, then that will be moved up the list.
Members have no other questions. Move to recommendations. Recommendation 1, members are asked to agree the implementation timetable for the Dumfries and Galloway Core Pass Plan for 13-14 attached to the appendix, and to the review and amended process for the Dumfries and Galloway Core Pass Plan attached to appendix 2. Move on to item 15. It's the leasing of Dumfries and Galloway Council's unmanaged woodland pilot project. Again, I believe Mr. Fieldhouse, you're speaking to this report. Have you anything to add?
Nothing to add, Chair.
Members have any questions? Councillor Prentice.
Yeah, just what is actually in it for the people who lease these woodlands?
Thank you, Chair. Obviously, the areas of woodland that we're looking at providing as part of the lease project, they are small, but they will offer community benefits in terms of being able to manage the timber extraction on a sustainable basis, and obviously use that timber for a wide range of purposes depending on what it's suitable for.
Councillor Diggle.
Does that include the sporting rights?
It shouldn't include the sporting rights, no. It would be primarily looking at managing the timber associated with the land.
If members have no other questions, move to recommendations. Do we agree to Dumfries and Galloway Council leasing as a pilot project the woodland areas at Gary's Wood, Gayhouse of Fleet, Barhow Wood, Kirkcudbright, Moatslap Plantation, Sandhead, and the coppice of land at Lochfergus, Kirkcudbright, to suitably qualified parties identified through the council procurement procedures. And note that stakeholder consultation would be undertaken before the sites are leased. And agree that if supported by members, a subsequent report will be submitted to the Policy and Resources Committee in conjunction with the Service Manager, Peter Nelson, to sign off the lease of Dumfries and Galloway Council assets. Thank you.
Is that a recommendation to Policy and Resources? So it would be a recommendation from this committee to sign off the lease?
It would be Policy and Resources, as far as I'm aware, that they would take the decision to actually sign the lease off. Yeah. With that, we'll go to item 16. It's the 3-year funding agreement, the Dumfries and Galloway Council and Visit Scotland update. Ms Brown is speaking to this report. Is there anything that you would like to add for the context of the report?
No, thank you, Chair.
Members, any questions? Councillor Ogilvie.
It's just a general point. Last week at Policy and Resources, we put aside quite a substantial sum of money for the flagship events. We've got this today and item 17, which all are doing the same thing, is trying to attract people. I just wonder if there's any synergy between the 3 funding streams. It's not evident in this particular report about, it's all council-based. I'm not against it in principle, I'm just saying, there's 3 funding streams for the same purpose. This one, there's any duplication or any way we could have a better synergy.
Thank you, Chair. In terms of the funding for Visit Scotland, it includes within the partnership agreements, there are elements in there which relate to specific funding for events. So there is some of our Memorandum of Understanding funding that goes to specific promotion and marketing of events in the region.
Any follow-up, Councillor Ogilvie?
No, I appreciate what Chris is saying, but there's a large sums of money we're being asked for and to try and attract. And I know the events that were highlighted last week were primarily for Dumfries and Galloway residents. Well, that's the way it was said in the report. However, it does attract tourists and visitors. And we're all trying to achieve the same thing. So the point I'm making is they're all council funded or partly funded. There should be some sort of synergy between the three things. You know, some sort of overview. These are three separate silos. I'm maybe not making myself very clear, but I just wondered, obviously officers at senior level must say, yeah, but are they funded, well, I'll try a different tack, Chair. Are they funded separately because there's a good reason to?
Thanks, Chair. In terms of the Visit Scotland funding, it's predominantly to fund marketing activity. The work that's undertaken with events sometimes funds actually supporting the event to come to Dumfries and Galloway, and some of that's also about going to the organisations who actually put the event together. In terms of when the events are then marketed, we use both Visit Scotland and Event Scotland to actually market them. So they're doing two separate jobs.
Councillor Carson?
I suppose it's sort of in the back of Councillor Ogilvie's question. There's specific amounts in the report with regards to Big Burn Supper and Wickerman and so on. What I would like to see at some point is a report of some sort that actually shows us the total funding for these things. What I'm concerned about is there's a little bit of money comes from Visit Scotland, there's a little bit of money comes from economic regeneration, a little bit comes from the major event strategy, and there's nowhere where we can clearly see just what the funding is for individual events. You know, the Big Burn Supper again, it seems to get funded from quite a few different streams, but I've got no idea actually how much the total funding from the council purse is. And I think that's something we need to know. It'd be interesting to see if we get a report on all these events, actually to see exactly how much. And again, we've got Save the Flavours, Flavour Fortnight, book festivals and so on, just how much money comes from the different pots to fund them overall.
Happy to do that. If I could just clarify in terms of some of the events that are in the Memorandum of Agreement this year. These were put in before colleagues brought the major event strategy forward. So we needed to ensure that the marketing activities for those particular events could already be undertaken given the time frame. So the way that they're funded next year will probably be very different anyway, because they will come out of a different funding stream rather than through Visit Scotland.
Councillor Guinness.
Perhaps a somewhat cynical question, Chairman, for Chris. In the exercise of your professional judgment, do you feel, in fact, that Visit Scotland's performance details, as set out in the appendix to the report, are such as to justify the allocation of funding for this year? Because there is, of course, a body of opinion which says that, by and large, people come here because they make up their mind to come anyway, and organisations, such as Visit Scotland, perhaps, benefit from that as a consequence. What would be your response to that, firstly? And secondly, do you feel, as I say, in the exercise of your professional judgment, that the performance would warrant a further, further year two funding?
Thank you. In terms of the marketing activities, if I could just give you some specific detail on that so that you can see the return on investment. For example, the spring-summer marketing campaign was a cost of $65,000 from the council, and the revenue worth of that was $984,728, which gives us a return on our investment of £14 for every pound that we actually spend. Likewise, I think particularly to highlight the golf promotion, particularly leading into Legacy in 2014 in terms of what we're doing with golf. For a small spend of £10,000, it generated £342,000. So the marketing activity, Councillor Geddes, I would say in my professional judgment, is bringing a valued return on investment. The area that we do, along with colleagues throughout the length and breadth of Scotland, have some concerns about is the visitor information centres. And that's largely down to predominant use now of social media for both booking and looking at locations such as Dumfries and Galloway before visitors come. That is something that is across the whole of Scotland, so that is something that we would suggest does need reviewed on an individual basis throughout next year, that we would seek to do with members' approval in partnership with Visit Scotland.
Follow-up, Councillor Geddes?
No, just an observation, sir, just to say, to thank, Chris, to me it's a very clear and a very helpful response. Thank you.
Councillor Peacock?
Thank you, Chair. Just a point of clarity as part of it, in any case, on the monitoring report on page 213, we have various tables showing footfall, bookings and bookings value, etc. Within those tables, we have Southwaite service station there on the M6. Now, I presume I'm correct in saying that that is now closed, the visitor centre in there, and all the Visit Scotland stuff was moved into the Gretna Information Centre. So therefore, what sort of measures are we taking to increase the hopeful, added capacity to the Gretna Centre for what we would expect, or at least encourage to take from the closure of the Southwaite, to bring that in through Gretna and on through into Dumfries and Galloway?
Thank you. In terms of the Southwaite closure, that was down to the leasehold of that particular site expiring, and the Visit Scotland were not able to renew the lease on that. What we were able to, in partnership with Visit Scotland, have an agreement was that there was some racking put up at Southwaite and also some directional signing, so that potential visitors knew that the predominance of that activity had now moved to Gretna. Some of the staff also moved to Gretna from the Southwaite site in readiness for what has been increased numbers, and there's been additional facilities put into the Gretna VIC at the outlet centre to actually support increased footfall.
Councillor Nicholson?
It's kind of following on from Councillor Geddes with performance monitoring. I know it's a very difficult thing, many reasons how the figures fluctuate within visitors to the region, and the reasons why. It's how do we differentiate, what difference does Visit Scotland make to these figures? And it's, for example, if you have a Wicker Man festival, how do we differentiate how much worth the Visit Scotland is putting into the visitors that actually come to Wicker Man? For example, it was a sellout. How much has that got to do with Visit Scotland? How much has that got to do with self-promotion? How much has that got to do with word of mouth even? I think that I was at Wicker Man this year. I wasn't there last year, but for different reasons. So how much is that due to Visit Scotland, and it's probably, and how that performance is monitored within individuals?
In terms of, if I just take specifically the Wicker Man, the partnership agreement that we have is for £5,000 that is within the MOA that the council produces. That is then, it's not passed in cash to the Wicker Man Festival, it's actually used for marketing by Visit Scotland in partnership with the Wicker Man. What we also have is some outreach activity with Visit Scotland whereby they take stands at major events, one of which is the Wicker Man. And the idea of that is that they are then using that opportunity to market the rest of Dumfries and Galloway to visitors who are coming to the Wicker Man. So it has a spin-off effect to visitors to that particular event.
Councillor Dempster?
I've never been at the Wicker Man.
I know how it ends.
I see on page 213 at the very bottom recommendation they're talking about reviewing a full review of the visitor information centres, and that's probably appropriate because if you look at this document, it just about deals exclusively with A75. And there's far more to Dumfries and Galloway than A75, I would suggest, although some of you might not agree. And if you look at the information on the right-hand side column, I think the third paragraph talks about ticket sales were £200,000. The majority of that was for the bulk of the income was from selling Galloway golf Dumfries and Galloway golf passes. What about fishing and other leisure activities that they should be promoting as well? I mean, it shouldn't be exclusive, I wouldn't have thought. And unless we encourage Visit Scotland to embrace everything that's provided across the region, then we'll not really get out the bit. And has the change of the standing line to the Cairn Ryan had a serious impact on the Stranraer Information Centre? Maybe that's part of the review, whether it should go out there or not, I don't know. But clearly there are issues to be dealt with. And I mean, I've always had no concerns, I would say, questions in my mind about the validity of things like Visit Scotland. I suppose the only way you could test it was to stop funding it for a year and see whether or not there was any difference in visitors to the region, and that's maybe a risky approach to take. But other than that, I don't know how you would assess the real value of Visit Scotland, what we get for the public pound. But I do think a serious review is needed of the information facilities and outlets, because, as I say, the region is far wider than the A75.
Thank you, Chair. One of the things that has worked very successfully, as you can see from the figures here, is the partnership agreements that we've got with Visit Scotland and places like the Edinburgh/Moffat Woolen Mill in Moffat. So that's one of the areas that we'll look at within the review with Visit Scotland to see if there are more partnership opportunities. Just in terms of fishing, there's actually a Fish Pal, which is an online booking system that is specifically for people who are seeking to come to the area for fishing activities.
Can I just ask, and Chris will know about the answer today, I'm sure she won't, but does that embrace all fishing clubs, or is that just a sort of generalisation for, like, say, the town fishing in Dumfries?
It can incorporate all fishing activities. But if you would like further information on the detail of that, I don't have that to hand, but I can get that for me.
I'll get it on the internet. Do you say Fish Pal? I'll try that.
Councillor Diggle.
Me? Thank you. Fish Pal's very good, by the way. Can I just ask you, on the golf campaign, are you saying that the economic impact of 342,400 was a direct result of spending 10k? And secondly, how is that 342,000 calculated?
The figure is actually, there's quite a number of golf courses that participate within what's called the Golf Passport Scheme within Dumfries and Galloway, and I think all courses have actually signed up to that. Visit Scotland administer the sale of that pass, and they sold over 800 passes, but that equated to almost 2,000 rounds of golf. So that's where they actually know the number of people who have come to the region and the number of times that they've played on a course. The actual value for golf within the region is something around about 800,000 overall. We've got more detail on that if needed, but that's kind of most of the figures.
Yeah, that works out at £171 per round of golf. I would kind of dispute that.
That's the figures are not just from the golf pass, because Visit Scotland also put the people direct to the courses. That's just one way that the visitor can buy the passes. So the figure that they've calculated, that's not just on golf rounds, but it's also on accommodation for when people stay within the region, because there's a 3-day pass, a 3-round pass and a 6-round pass. And in the main, it's a 6-round pass that's been selling. So we know that that's getting 4 or 5 bed nights from each golfer.
Just not going into the detail now, but would it be possible just to have a breakdown on an email in the near future of that 342,000, please?
We'll certainly provide that information, Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Carson.
Thanks, Chair. I must admit, I'm a bit disappointed in the report because it really doesn't tell us whether Visit Scotland's been successful or really converting the money that we give them. The only real measures and targets in here are for the visitor centre, and the figures are really all over the place. What I would like is some explanation as to why, for example, we've got Kirkcudbright that had 46,000 of a footfall compared to Gretna at 44,000, but the conversion rate of bookings in Kirkcudbright is half of what it is, I beg your pardon, is considerably more in Kirkcudbright than it is in Gretna. So there's lots of things like that just don't seem to add up. The booking values in Kirkcudbright are substantially less than in Dumfries, but the footfall is very similar. So it's trends like that would be interesting to see whether, why some visitor centres are performing considerably less than other ones, given the footfall. I would imagine that, Gretna, being the kind of gateway to the area, would have had a far higher booking number than Kirkcudbright, because people are then in the heart of the Kirkcudbright and they would generally have made bookings and whatever before they actually ventured in. I don't know, there's information like that it's not really giving us an idea of whether the money we're investing is actually returning what we think it should, because it would appear that apart from the website, the visitor centre information is all we can really judge on whether it's increasing or decreasing.
In terms of the VICs, that's one of the reasons that we're seeking from members' approval to actually carry out a full recommendation. Some of the data at the moment doesn't drill down into the level that we need to actually make that full review, which is why we're requesting that we can undertake that and come back to elected members with a full detailed report and with recommendations then on individual VICs and their performance.
If there's no other questions, I'll move to recommendation. Recommendation 2.1, members are asked to agree the allocation of 240,000 to Visit Scotland for the provision of marketing, visitor information services and partnership activities for 13-14. Asked to agree to a full review of the current Visitor Information Centre provision with a detailed report presented to members later in the year as detailed at paragraph 3.9 in the report. To note Visit Scotland performance is detailed in the Service Level Agreement Monitoring Report for 12-13. And to receive an annual update report on Visit Scotland marketing and partnership activities for Dumfries and Galloway as part of the annual Visit Scotland Performance Service Level Agreement Monitoring Report provided to Planning and Environmental Services. Councillor Carson.
Can we ensure that there is a report comes back? I don't know whether it is including the recommendations to look at the overall activities and funding for some of the activities we've looked at, which takes into consideration the major events.
I don't really think that needs a report coming to here. It would just be for information of members. If members are quite happy for that to be compiled and sent to members of the committee by email. Thank you. Move to item 17, Destination Dumfries and Galloway monitoring service. Monitoring report. I believe Ms Brown, you're speaking to this one again. Is there anything to add to the report?
No, thank you, Chair.
Open the floor to questions for members. Councillor Carson.
Just a simple question. Can you give us an idea, in your opinion, why Destination Dumfries and Galloway didn't reach all the targets in their SLA from last year? Is there any overall position on why they maybe didn't achieve that?
Thank you, Chair. I think there are certain elements, Councillor Castle, that we would say they've performed satisfactorily and done well. There are other elements, certainly, that we would have hoped would have been improved further, which is why we've detailed those within the service level agreement next year. Some of it was particularly related to the Tourism Development Executive actually starting up in post later than we'd anticipated. And the restructuring of the board has taken some considerable time, but we focused on the areas that we wanted to see greater emphasis on for the Council's funding in the service level agreement for the next financial year, if members agree that today.
I really welcome that. It looks like the council and the organisation have got together to look at targets that are achievable, so I welcome the work that's been done.
Any other members, any questions? I'll have my go now. When you look at the service level agreement for last year, of the 9 points, 4 weren't achieved and 1 was achieved late. My opinion would be that that is not satisfactory performance for the service level agreement that was agreed by the organisation. What would be your professional view, to use the parlance that was used earlier, on their performance overall regarding the service level agreement that they agreed last year with the council?
Thank you, Chair. I think if I could reiterate my response to Councillor Carson, that there are some areas that were achieved, there were some areas that were not achieved. We're focusing on those next year in the service level agreement to ensure that the funding that the council puts into Destination Dumfries and Galloway does actually bring the return back to the council that we would seek from that particular organisation.
Councillor Geddes.
Thanks, Chairman. I know it's not what I would call a traditional scrutiny of leaked performance management report, but on the back of what Chris has just said, perhaps we should bear in mind in the future, in such circumstances, it would be worthwhile producing the likes of an exception report or reports, to flag these up. Interestingly enough, further on, earlier in the agenda today, we had a de facto exception report in relation to the 3 automated toilets, in the region, albeit they didn't, as I say, it didn't form an exception report as part of the wider report. I'm not precious about how we do it, but I think in these circumstances it would be worthwhile getting an exception report, a more detailed report, call it what you will, focusing on these and giving us a bit more information and knowledge and depth as a consequence. It's not a criticism, sir. It's an effort to be, to make a helpful suggestion for once.
Yeah, I would certainly appreciate a fuller explanation of targets, for the want of a better word, that weren't reached. I also have some slight concern that we are concentrating on the new service level agreement for next year to concentrate on what wasn't achieved this year, but I have some concern that we'll leave it another year before finding out that the service level agreement for this year hasn't been achieved. Is there any way that we can ask for a monitoring report in 6 months regarding the how the service level agreement is getting on during the year, rather than waiting to the end of the year like we have this year to find out that it hasn't been achieved?
I'm happy to do that, Chair. If that's the view of the committee, we're happy to bring a detailed report on achievement at 6 months and in terms of the service level agreement for the next financial year.
Councillor Geddes.
Well, I think in the specific circumstances of this case, sir, where it is accepted that certainly these targets have not been met, I think that would be justified. I don't think it would be draconian to ask for that. And I would, if you're moving, Councillor Carson, you are moving that in that direction, I would certainly be prepared to support you.
Yeah, Chair, I'm happy to do that, because if nothing else, if they are straying off the level agreement, we would like to think that as a council we could help support them in that. So I would certainly welcome a 6 monthly progress report.
Yeah, I'm quite happy to second that. Councillor Dempster.
Aye, just where does that leave the proposal on 2.2 to agree the allocation of the funding? Because clearly there is no control then whether or not you have a monitoring report if you've already agreed the funding for the year.
Councillor Geddes.
Well, I was not envisaging, so that would impact on our decision today to give the funding. Give the funding today, but make it clear in the giving of the funding that there are certain aspects of the performance which concern us, and that we would want to see these addressed on the basis of a monitoring report in 6 months' time. So I think that gets the message across, sir.
Yes, I would agree totally with what Councillor Geddes says. Are you happy enough with the explanation, Councillor Dempster?
Oh, I think so. And in that case, it'll be then up to us when we receive that report how we view the delivery of the service from Destination Dumfries and Galloway. I'm fine with that. I just want to know where we are with the proposal, given what had been said earlier.
Yeah, there's no other questions from any members. I'll move to the recommendations. Recommendation 2.1. The recommendation is published says note the satisfactory annual monitoring review of Destination Dumfries and Galloway 12-13 for their first year of funding is detailed. Do we wish to amend that by removing the word satisfactory, considering the discussions that we have that's taken place today?
Can you put acceptable instead, Chair?
Are we actually saying it's acceptable if we're asking for a 6-month monitoring report? I would propose that 2.1 should read note the annual monitoring review of Destination Dumfries and Galloway 12-13 for their first year of funding is detailed. Thank you. 2.2 agree the allocation of 45,000 for funding for 13-14. 2.3 possibly I would propose rewording that as to receive a full monitoring report in 6 months on Destination Dumfries and Galloway's activities as part of the annual monitoring review provided to Planning and Environment Services. That gives us the chance to get the 6-month monitoring report and then the 12 months. And 2.4 agree to the revised outputs of the service level agreement as detailed in Appendix 3. Thank you. I'll now move on to item 18. Plan and Performance Framework Annual Report 12-13. And I believe Mr Rogers, you're speaking to the report. I'll wait till you sit down before I ask you. Is there anything you would like to add to the contents of the report, Mr Rogers?
I think I'll skip my 30-minute presentation, Chair. Happy to move straight to questions.
Councillor Geddes.
References made in the report, sir, to legacy applications. It would be of assistance, to know, insofar as we can, whether or not there's been a common thread or common threads running through these, when they're all likely to be flushed out the system, i.e. determined, and how also we can ensure, in fact, that that such a situation doesn't recur for the future. I'm not KPI daft, I like to think, but the existence of these legacy projects or applications does nothing, of course, as it were, to give a good impression in relation to our ability to meet our KPIs.
Mr. Rogers.
Chair, certainly a number of these legacy applications, which are defined as applications that have been in the system for more than 12 months, have been dealt with over the past year, and I think that reflects in the improvement in performance, particularly of the major planning applications category, where we significantly improved performance last year over the previous year. There's certainly strong encouragement coming to us from Scottish Government now not to sit on applications that are more than 52 weeks old. Historically, this has sometimes happened in situations where there are unresolved issues surrounding applications. For example, some of the wind farm applications were essentially held in abeyance because of issues to do with either MOD objections or alternately objections from the airport in connection with radar systems and so on. We're now being encouraged to persuade applicants to actually either withdraw applications when issues like this come up and resubmit once the issue has been resolved, or alternately, we may actually have to push things through to a refusal for lack of information, but at least there's a decision and they're out of the system.
Thanks very much indeed, sir. That's helpful.
Any other members with any questions?
Thanks, Chair. It's on page 250, Sam 12. Sorry. Item 4, implement the road, get this thing off my nose, road development hub with colleagues in DG First. Can you just explain a bit more about that, please?
Yeah, certainly we've been working, Chair, with our colleagues in DG First to try to improve the level of joint working between development management and roads officers on issues around planning applications and planning consultations. The approach that we're piloting with DG First is for them to actually set up what they refer to as a roads development hub. And that essentially is an attempt to bring together all of the planning consultation activities to be coordinated through a single contact point rather than being dealt with separately across the 4 area roads depots as currently happens. So that would involve a small team, initially 1 person, but subsequently being expanded to 3 people, being actually located in Kirkbank House alongside the planning staff to improve day-to-day communication.
Yeah, thanks. You mentioned there about the improved performance. From memory, we were 31 out of 32 last year. How much have we improved? Are we aware of that as yet?
Yeah, Chair, in terms of our processing times with planning applications, in the report that you have in front of you, in terms of our turnaround times for local planning applications, we were ranked 25th out of 34 authorities, and that compares with 31st in the previous year. So there has been an improvement in performance on local applications. Performance on major applications, we were ranked 16th out of 29 authorities that actually received any major applications. And that compares previously with a position of 28th. So there has been some noticeable improvement in our overall standing. I think there is still scope for further improvement, particularly when we start to look at our performance on householder planning applications, where I think there is still potential for that to be improved further.
Yeah, thanks. I would agree there's probably room for improvement, but at least we seem now to be starting to go in the right direction as regarding planning from where we were last year. Councillor Peacock.
Thank you, Chair. Just a quick point on the enforcement activity. Between the cases taken up of 153 and the resolved cases of 45. But between last year and, well, the previous 2 years, as it's noted, there's been no reports to the Procurator Fiscal and no prosecutions on these enforcement activities. I'm just wondering as to why that is. I mean, I'm sure we've all had issues in our own areas with enforcement issues and planning related activities, and it has been mentioned in the Housing Subcommittee before, again with reference to the Dumfries Town Centre, about following up enforcement activities put on property owners and that for various discretions. So if there's a bit more detail on that, please, as to why there's been no prosecutions at all.
Chair, the enforcement activities that we undertake, the emphasis is very much on trying to seek resolution of breaches of planning control before we ever get to the stage of court action. Court action is essentially a last resort, and I would regard it as somewhat of a failure if we had to rely on court action in order to address the breaches that are reported to us. Usually these are capable of being resolved through a process of ongoing negotiation between our enforcement inspectors and the applicants concerned.
Yeah, I appreciate that, Mr. Rogers, but in the figures put before us, out of 153 cases taken up, less than a third of that, according to your own figures, have been resolved.
A number of the cases that are taken up ultimately don't progress any further because on further investigation, whilst they might be taken up to be further investigated, it actually turns out that there is not any formal process or formal action that we can undertake whilst we accept a case and take it on and investigate it further. There's only a small number or a minority of them that actually process through into requiring any sort of formal enforcement action, which can start with the servicing of notices, which happens in a number of cases. We only then progress through to court action if the notices fail to have the desired impact. And it's only when somebody's in breach of a notice that it actually becomes a criminal offence.
Councillor Geddes.
On the back of Councillor Peacock's comments, I would have to say, sir, that I have a certain degree of concern here, because the last thing I would want, and I would hope anyone else in this committee would want to do either, would be to criminalise anyone. But by the same token, there are certain instances, certain occasions, in fact, where my understanding is that it's almost, there's a reluctance, a very considerable reluctance to pass issues to the Procurator Fiscal. I've heard it put to me on the basis that, well, we strongly suspect that the Fiscal will not do anything with it anyway. Now, my view, and I'm not suggesting, I'm not trying to be draconian, Chairman, as I've said, I certainly don't want to criminalise anyone, but my view is that, if you continue, or if we continue in that vein, we leave this council open to reputational risk, or reputational damage, because, I can think of at least one case, where in fact, community becoming quite exercised at what they see as a flagrant and total disregard for the relevant planning provisions. And at the end of the day, if that's not followed through, the charge always is, to me, capable of being levied against the council. But you've got different standards for different situations and different people. And my view is that, we should, in fact, where it's felt warranted, pass matters to the Procurator Fiscal. At the end of the day, the Fiscal is the master of the instance. He decides or she decides whether or not they will take any further action. If they decide to take no further action, there is no comeback. Forgive, I don't mean to sound cynical, but there is no comeback, Chairman, against this authority. And any complaints made against the authority would simply be met by the situation that we did everything that we could. It was passed on, and if the Fiscal decided to take no further action, that is a matter for the Crown Office and your MSPs, not for Dumfries and Galloway Council. And I would ask, and I'm not getting involved in operational matters, Chairman, but I would ask that be borne in mind for the future, please.
I would certainly agree that if, and it probably won't surprise people regarding coming from the background that I do come from, that if there's an offence, you report it to the Fiscal. I was always of the mind that I reported offences to the Fiscal. What he did after that was no my concern, and I think the council should be in the same position. If it gets to the stage where all other avenues have been tried and there is an offence, it gets reported to the Fiscal. We have no control over it once it goes to the Fiscal. Councillor Carson.
A quick question, page 254, local reviews and appeals. There's been quite a dramatic jump in the number of local reviews and appeals to Scottish ministers. I'm assuming that's because of wind farm applications. If that's the case, what is the impact on performance and also financially to the council? And will the new local development plan address any of these issues?
I'm not sure I have the sufficient detail to answer the detailed point there, but in general terms, I think part of the reason why there's been an increase in uptake of local reviews is that people are now understanding the operation of the new system. And there were some significant changes, as you know, made to the planning system, and the whole thing about local reviews was only introduced relatively recently. And I think what we're seeing is that in particular as local agents start to have experience of working the local review body and working the new system, then they start to encourage more and more clients to exercise their right to take up a review. So I think that, and this I think is being also reflected in other authorities, they're also experiencing an increase in the number of local reviews, and I think it's just for that reason. The appeals to Scottish ministers, there could be, but this would be purely speculation, a link to the extent to which our development plans are now becoming out of date and perceived as becoming out of date, given that we've got a structure plan that was adopted in 1999. So that could be encouraging more people to submit appeals. I don't have any information on the breakdown. I'd be happy to provide that out with this meeting in terms of the application types that are being subjected to appeal.
Well, yeah, happy to get that out with the meeting, Councillor Carson. If there's no other questions, I have no other business. As Vice Chair of the committee, I would like to thank you all. Oh, sorry, I'm jumping the gun here. Turn to recommendations. Members asked to consider the draft planning performance framework annual report 1213 contained at the appendix and agree to its submission to the Scottish Government. I'll now close the business and thank everybody as Vice Chairman of the committee for their forbearance. Thank you.